In this world, there are several different species roaming the planet, each with their own special strengths and abilities. And then there are humans like Light who are pretty much useless. One day, Light leaves his home in hopes of becoming an adventurer and heads to the big city so he can sign up. Upon arrival, he meets one of the receptionists there and she helps him through the registration process. Since this is his first time registering at the guild, she tells him he will be starting at F rank, and just to make sure Light won't be completely worthless, she asks him if he at least has a gift he can use, and Light excitedly informs her that his ability is gacha gambling. The receptionist freezes up for a moment because she doesn't think she heard him right, but it's exactly what it sounds like. Light has the ability to summon a gacha wheel, and by pressing it, he gets a random item each time. He wants to give her a demonstration, so he pushes the button, and the item he receives is a bent fork. Okay, let's hear him out. That one was probably just a fluke, so he tries again, but this time he just gets some food, and it's not even the good kind either. The receptionist sighs and politely tells Light he's never making it out of F rank with an ability like that. Light asks her if there is any work he can accept as an F ranker, and she directs him to the bulletin board where all the available jobs are posted. But on top of being useless, he's never been to school, so he doesn't know how to read. The receptionist understands his struggle, so she takes out a list and tells Light that the best options for him at the moment are the firewood gathering, soil hauling, or landscaping jobs, but the pay is barely scraping minimum wage, so he won't earn much from it. Light says he'll happily do it, so later that day, he is out doing as much manual labor as his little body can handle. And by nightfall, he has barely earned enough money to cover his lodging expenses. However, as he is walking down the street, a group of beastmen happen to be passing by, and they immediately clock Light as a victim, so they intentionally bump into him and steal his money. Light begs them to give it back because without it, he's going to have to spend the night on the street. But the beastmen don't care, and frankly, neither does anyone else since regular humans are at the bottom of the species hierarchy, so no one is willing to stand up for him. Light sits in the mud while all the people passing by call him useless trash for no reason, until eventually, someone actually stops to lend him a hand. Light takes the woman's hand thinking she's a fellow human, but when he realizes she's an elf, he recoils in fear because he thinks he's about to be taken advantage of again. The elf tells him he doesn't have to worry, and to prove it, she gets down on her knees in the mud just to hug him. Light can hardly believe that an elf would treat a human like him with such kindness, but she doesn't seem to be lying, so Light decides to go along with it. She introduces him to the rest of her party members and explains that they are the Concord of Tribes, a party that incorporates members from all 9 races across the world with the goal of eradicating discrimination among races. The leader is a beastman named Guru, and the elf's name is Sasha. They already got members from most of the different races, so now the only thing they need is a human to become their 9th member, and that's why they want to ask Light to join their party. This all sounds good on paper, but of all the people they could get, they really had to choose the powerless and defenseless 12-year-old boy to join their special party. At least there's no baby oil this time. From then on, whenever Concord would go on a mission, Light would join them as their baggage handler, but he's still just as useless as he was before because not even 10 minutes in, he almost gets one-shotted by a giant snake monster. Fortunately, Drago and Sasha manage to save him before anything bad happens, but Sasha tells him he really needs to get his act together because this is one of the world's most dangerous dungeons and literally anything in here could kill him, so he needs to make sure he sticks close to the team. Light apologizes for his mistake, but Sasha doesn't want him to feel too bad about himself, so she just asks him to come closer so she can check if he's hurt or not. While she's busy looking after Light, the others come over and start teasing Sasha for always doting on Light any chance she gets. They are done here, so the group continues moving further into the dungeon with Light in the center so nothing bad can happen to him. But once they get to a narrow section of the path, Guru says this will be a good place to stop. Light assumes he means he wants them to take a break, so he sets his bag down and starts making some tea for everyone, but Drago tells him that won't be necessary because they are actually here to banish him from the party. Light can't believe what he just heard, so he asks them if this is some sort of prank, but literally everyone in the party, including Sasha who was being so nice to him a minute ago, suddenly does a 180 and calls Light an ugly, brainless, good-for-nothing human. Light doesn't understand what's going on, so they all explain to him that they've been pretending to like him this entire time, and that whole thing about wanting to get rid of discrimination. That was a total lie. In fact, they are some of the most racist people you'll ever meet, so they've been dying to get rid of Light since the day he joined them. If that's the case, then Light asks why they even bothered asking him to join in the first place, so Guru tells him they were only after him because of his skill. Light doesn't understand what he means since his gacha skill is as useless as it gets, but while that may be true, it's similar to the skill of the Maestro, and the Concord's higher-ups were interested in seeing if Light's skill would evolve into something that's actually useful, so they were told to be nice to him until then, even though they didn't want to. However, those same higher-ups recently decided that Light was a lost cause, so now the party has no reason to act like they care about him in the slightest. Light can't wrap his head around everything they just said, and the group realizes they might have let too much information slip, but it's not like it's going to matter soon, because Light isn't leaving this dungeon alive. His eyes go wide as soon as he hears them say that, and a second later, Garou uses his claws to slash him across the face, making it very clear that they really do intend to kill him. He takes off running to get away from them, but they all just laugh and tell him that even if he did manage to escape, he'd just end up dying to a random monster in the dungeon. With that said, they think it'll be much more fun to kill him with their own hands, so Sasha takes her bow and shoots him through the thigh to stop him from escaping. They are all enjoying the sound of Light's terror-filled cries, and Garou begins beating him up to get him to cry some more. But the others tell him to quit it because their cover story is meant to be that Light was killed by a surprise monster attack, so they can't give him any suspicious injuries. Light desperately tries to crawl away because he doesn't want to die here. But with his leg injured like this, Garou tells him there's no way he's going to escape. Even so, he continues trying to get away, and as luck would have it, he managed to trigger a teleportation trap. The trap sends him straight to one of the deeper floors, so Light is now safe from the Concord members, but that doesn't mean he is going to survive this. He is well aware of how weak he is, so he knows he's a goner the second a single monster shows up. He tries coming to terms with the fact that this is the end of the road, but he doesn't understand why all this happened to him. For the past 4 years, all the members of Concord had treated him with respect and kindness, but it all turned out to be a lie. They were just using him because they thought he was a maestro, and when they found out he wasn't, they tried to kill him laughing in his face. He absolutely refuses to let them get away with that. No matter how hard it is, he swears that he will make it out of here alive and kill them all, even if it's the last thing he ever does. However, just then, Light hears something walk up behind him, and to his horror, he finds a level 1000 stone chimera staring him down. Even the strongest adventurers only have a few hundred levels, and he has never seen a monster like this before, so that must mean he was teleported to one of the lowest parts of the abyss. As the monster approaches him, he practically pisses himself in fear because he knows there's no way he can beat this thing. All he has right now is his gacha ability, and has a terrible track record when it comes to being useful. He has no other option, so he frantically starts pushing the button over and over, hoping that it will save him, and miraculously, as the monster lunges at him, his gacha wheel transforms and a beautiful maid girl appears, destroying the monster in an instant. Light is speechless after what he just witnessed, so he just sits there as the girl walks up to him. She kneels before Light and puts her hand on his cheek to heal his wound because she couldn't bear the sight of such scars on his beautiful body. Light is amazed because all the pain is gone now. The maid refers to him as Master and asks what his name is, so he tells her that he is called Light, and right there and then she swears to serve him with eternal loyalty for the rest of her life. Her name is Mai, and she is known as the Ever-Seeking Maid. As for her level, it's over 9,000. She says she is an ultra-rare pull from Light's gacha skill, so her very being is bound to him. But Light is having trouble processing all this since he has always thought his gacha skill was completely worthless, so it should be impossible for someone as amazing as Mai to come out of it. Mai asks him for permission to approach his ability so she can determine its true nature. Light is surprised to learn that Mai has an appraisal ability, but to be clear, she tells him that it's only one of her many skills. Light tells her she's free to appraise him, so she begins the scan, and she is truly amazed by what she sees. Light's gacha skill has dozens of layers of protection woven into it, so only people of Mei's level are able to see its true capabilities, and from what she can tell, it can be used an unlimited number of times. The rewards that it generates depend on the surrounding mana density and go all the way from ranks like EX and Super Ultra Rare to Normal and Error. Light doesn't really understand what Mai is talking about, so she explains that there is always mana present in the atmosphere. But the mana density on the surface is quite low, which reduces the chances of unlocking a useful reward like Mai to almost zero. However, in the deepest part of a dungeon like this, the mana density is incredibly high, so the probability of a successful summon shot up exponentially. Mai assumes Light must have intentionally ventured down to the depths of the dungeon to bring out the true potential of his gift, but that couldn't be further from the truth. He came down here with people he thought he could trust, but they all ended up betraying him. They slashed his face, shot him in the leg, and laughed at him the entire time they did it. All Light ever wanted was to give his family a better life, but they tried to kill him just because he's a human. He begins yelling that he will never forgive them for as long as he lives, but Mai pulls Light into a hug for comfort because she hates seeing him so sad. She knows she could never understand the suffering Light must have felt, but she knows how to make him feel better. She assures Light that as soon as he gives the order, she will have the heads of those backstabbers lined up on the floor within the hour, but he gets up and tells her she can't do that. Mai tells him that scoundrels like those people do not deserve mercy, but he didn't tell her to wait because he thinks killing them would be wrong. Rather, it's because he wants to be the one to get revenge with his own two hands. He fell for their trick and nearly died at their hands because he was too weak to defend himself, so he wants to become strong enough to make sure nothing like that ever happens to him again. He knows it sounds far-fetched for a weakling like him to say he wants to be strong, but Mai doesn't think it's impossible at all. She swears that if he wants to become strong enough to exact revenge on his own, then she will do everything within her power to make that happen. We cut to 3 years into the future, and right in the middle of the Abyss dungeon, Light has used his gacha skill to build an entire nation and summon an army of powerful servants who are so down bad for him that they pay good money to get a cup of his bathwater. As he and May walk down the halls, she gets really annoyed by all the fairy maids constantly trying to get Light's attention, but Light doesn't see it as a problem since it's just a sign of their devotion to him. They head out into the city to greet Light's people, and everyone here truly loves and respects him as their leader. One even brings up that the monthly sweet supply is running low, and Light promises to look into getting some more. He thinks it might be a supply chain issue since the city has way more people now than it did 3 years ago, so he will have to adjust things to satisfy the increased demand. In the meantime, Light asks May if she knows what the other super elite servants he summoned are up to right now, so she tells him that Oyuki is busy napping out the area around the Abyss, and Ellie has been busy researching new magic to help Light achieve his goals. He's grateful that everyone is doing so much to help him out, but May didn't mention anything about Nezuna, so he wonders what she's been up to lately. May explains that Nezuna is just patrolling the inside the castle for now, but it's not because they need added security inside, it's because she's too dumb to help with anything that doesn't involve fighting. Meanwhile, inside the castle, we see Nezuna cheerfully strolling through the hallways without a care in the world, but as long as she's not causing trouble, they usually just let her do whatever she wants. As for Light, it is now time for his daily training session, so he goes to meet with one of his elite summons, Jack. Even though he has all these powerful subordinates to protect him, he still wants to be strong enough to handle things on his own, so he often goes out to spar with Jack, and after 3 years of this routine, he is capable of going blow for blow with him. Back in the castle, Nezuna is still walking around aimlessly until she happens to run into a few of the maids handling cleaning duty for today. She tells them she's on a super important patrol mission right now, and the maids all tell her that she's doing a really good job, but they are really just trying to flatter her into doing them a favor. And it's working. Now that she's in a good mood, they tell her that there's a special place that they'd like her to patrol from them, and Nezuna agrees to listen to their request without a second thought. A few minutes later, Nezuna knocks on the door to Light's bedroom, but to her surprise, May is the one who answers. She asks Nezuna what she's doing here, and Nezuna proudly states that she's on patrol, which is technically true. But now that she thinks about it, she wonders what May is doing in Light's room in the first place, since he's supposed to be training with Jack right now. May tries to make up an excuse and says she was just cleaning Light's room for him while he is away, but while she was talking, Nezuna manages to slip inside, and it definitely doesn't look like May was doing much cleaning in here. In fact, if Nezuna had to guess, she'd say May was rolling around on Light's bed and sniffing his pillow until a moment ago. May panics and says that was just part of her special bed-making technique, and Nezuna doesn't question how dumb that sounds for you in 1 second, so she starts praising May for doing such a good job. Speaking of jobs, she finally remembers that the fairy maids asked her to deliver a message to May, and it basically says they are tired of her keeping Light's room to herself all the time because they want to clean his stuff too. Nezuna doesn't really understand what the big fuss is about, but May receive the message loud and clear, so she gives Nezuna a little reward for her trouble and sends her on her way. Now that she's done delivering the message, she heads down to the pastry shop to buy herself a treat with the money May gave her, and afterwards she happens to run into Oyuki on one of the terraces. Nezuna is surprised to see her here since she thought Oyuki was out on a surveillance mission, but she just keeps mewing, so Nezuna has no idea what she's saying. Light is usually able to decipher what those mews are meant to mean, but Nezuna's best guess is that Oyuki wants Nezuna to destroy the entire forest for her for no reason. Nezuna would definitely do that too, if no one corrected her, so Oyuki is forced to break character and speak normally to tell Nezuna that she just came to deliver a section of the map that she completed. Nezuna laughs and tells Oyuki she should have just said that from the beginning, so she takes the map and heads off to continue her patrol. Her next stop is the throne room, and after making sure there's no one around, she starts hugging Light's throne because she hasn't gotten to see him at all today. But while she is doing that, she suddenly hears a loud crunch sound, and to her horror, she realizes that she just broke the wing off one of the throne fixtures. She's going to get in a lot of trouble if anyone finds out about this, so she frantically fixes it just enough so it will break as soon as someone else touches it, and then she bolts out of there. Outside, Light and Jack are finally done with their training session, so they call it a day and head to the baths to relax. Jack tells Light he is getting really good at controlling his body, and there aren't many people down here who are strong enough to keep up with him anymore. The same probably goes for the people on the surface, but he reminds Light that he shouldn't let himself get too cocky, because they don't know what might be waiting for them on the surface. Light says he understands that he needs to be prepared, and he promises not to let his power go to his head so there will be no mistakes when the time comes for his revenge. Meanwhile, May has called the 4 fairy maids who gave Nazuna that message into her office, and she does not seem happy. She asks them if they know why she has summoned them here today, and they try to feign ignorance, but then May reads out their letter word for word, and she already got Nazuna to tell her that they were the ones who wrote the letter, so there's no way for them to weasel their way out of this mess. They all shuffle backwards and start apologizing for what they wrote, but they try to downplay their actions by saying they only did it out of concern for May. They say they know she's been busy lately, so they wanted to lighten her load by taking over the cleaning of Light's room for her, and maybe sniffing a pillow or two while they were at it. But that's not the point. May is also disappointed by the fact that they made Nazuna do their dirty work for them, since she might have considered it if they had the guts to deliver their message in person. She tells them that their request has been denied, and until further notice, they will be assigned to cleaning the entire corridor that leads to the throne room. And they aren't allowed to use any magic to speed up the process either. The maids can't believe May would give them such an impossible task because it'd take forever to clean that huge corridor by hand, but May doesn't think it'd be that hard. If anything, she says she's doing them a favor since level 500s like them need to put in a lot of hard work if they ever hope to reach her level. Additionally, May informs them that she is heading to the surface soon on a mission for Light, so the 4 of them are going to have to pick up the slack while she's gone. Later on, the 4 maids gather in their room, and they are really upset by the fact that May is punishing them for making a simple complaint. They don't think it's fair that she's the only one who gets to bask in Light's scent, but May is the strongest of them all, so there's no way they can stand up to her. Prime suggests that they could try poisoning her, but Hifumi already looked into that, and May is immune to all forms of poison, so there's no way it'd work. They all resign themselves to defeat and start groaning about how much they want to clean Light's room and sniff his bed. Hifumi takes it a step further and says she wants to use one of Light's used forks, but hearing her say that out loud makes it sound weird, so the others all call her a degenerate and say she's taking it too far. Hifumi defends herself and says everyone here would probably do the same thing if they got the opportunity, and they can't deny it, so they really are just as bad as Hifumi. Now that they think about it, May isn't much better than they are either, since she was all up in Light's bed earlier today, and the fact that she was the first one Light summoned means that for who knows how long she and Light were alone in the dungeon together. And at the time, Light's level was so low that he wouldn't have been able to defend himself from any monsters, so he was probably clinging to May the entire time. They'd all go mad with jealousy at the thought that May might have done indecent things with Light at some point, and Hifumi comes up with the bright idea of turning their jealous energy into a curse, so they all sit at the table and begin chanting over and over for May to die. Unfortunately for them, May has been standing outside their door this entire time, and she could hear every word they just said about her, so she asks them if they have anything to say for themselves. The 4 cower behind the table and begin telling May that they would never actually wish for anything bad to happen to her, but May clearly heard them praying for her death, so she asks what that was about. The group eventually admits that they were just jealous because May was summoned first and got to spend a lot of alone time with Light because of it, but May tells them that nothing indecent happened between her and Light. It took around 3 months for Light to summon Oyuki, and in that time May was busy teaching him about martial arts and world history, so no debauchery took place. The girls are relieved to hear that, but then May continues speaking and tells them that she had originally come here to apologize for giving them such a harsh punishment earlier, but after what they just did, she thinks she may need to be even harsher than before. She tells them that they will now be required to clean the entire throne room in addition to the corridor. The 3 kneel at May's feet and beg her to reconsider because there's no way they'd be able to clean the giant throne room by themselves, but May tells them they shouldn't have thought of that before they decided to prey on her downfall. They are forced to get to work immediately, and at this rate, they might have to work through the night to get it all done. But while Hifumi was dusting off the throne, the wing of the broken fixture falls off, and they all go silent as they realize just how screwed they are. All the while, Nazuna is lying in her bed without a care in the world. The next morning, Light heads outside and meets Oyuki, Nazuna, and Ellie out by the front gate. Nazuna is particularly excited to see Light since she didn't get to talk to him at all yesterday. Light wants to go straight to the point, but just then a rockhound appears out of nowhere, and even though Light is strong enough that it isn't a threat to him, he still begins trembling with fear a little because he remembers the day he nearly died to one of these. The others are enraged that a mere hound would dare to frighten their lord, so they start discussing plans to wipe its kind from existence. The hound didn't even do anything yet, but it can tell that one wrong move would spell its doom, so it lies down on the floor and starts whimpering for its life. Light tells the others that there's no need to get so upset because he's fine, and he even goes over to pet the hound to show them that it doesn't bother him. He apologizes to the hound for scaring it so much, and if he hadn't stepped in, they'd have actually wiped out its entire species without hesitation. They ask Light if there's a reason he told them to meet him out here, and he says May told him everything is ready for the mission, so they can finally head out to exact his revenge. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world, Garou is walking through a Beastman town, and as the Beast hero, everyone here is fawning over him. In fact, this one dude in the back even offers to pimp out his own sister, but Garou isn't interested right now. Just then, he spots a poor human sifting through the trash for something to eat, and this kid was nowhere near Garou, but he decides to take a detour just so he can knock the child to the ground and spit on his face for fun. Afterwards, Garou and his team of lackeys head to a private room so they can begin glazing him. Figuratively, of course. They tell him they think it's amazing that he went from a poor beast slum child to the frontrunner to become the next chief. Even the current village chief has acknowledged his power, so they ask him how he managed to get this far. Garou brags that he just uses his instincts to pick out the best jobs for himself, like that one he took 3 years ago. He got paid a lot to pretend to be part of a race unification party, and all he had to do was finish off a human who was suspected of being a master. He never actually confirmed whether Light was dead or not, but with how weak he was, there's no way he could have survived down there on his own, so he thinks it'd be best to just forget about the brat. However, a moment later, May walks into the room asking about Light. Garou's lackeys yell that she has no right to speak to him like that, but Garou says it's fine because he would like to hear what business she has with him. May explains that she's a maid serving Lord Light, and she makes up a story claiming that Light is of noble blood and she has been searching all over the continent for him. Garou is skeptical since the people who hired him for that mission did a thorough background check on Light, and Light himself never mentioned anything about being a noble, but May definitely looks like a rich noble's maid, so he sees this as a good opportunity to make some cash. He asks her what she wants with him, so May says that she recently discovered that Light supposedly passed away in the dungeon 3 years ago, so she would like Garou to lead her to his last known location so she can pay her respects. She even offers to pay him in solid gold for the trouble, but Garou's senses are warning him that this whole thing is a trap. It seems way too fishy that she's willing to pay so much just for them to lead her into the dungeon, but since May looks like an ordinary human female, Garou brushes off his concerns because there's no way a human would be able to beat him. He agrees to lead her to Light's last known location, but he says he's not doing this for the money, he's doing this because Light was a good friend of his, and he wants to help out in any way he can. May knows that everything he just said is complete BS, but she has to stay in character, so she thanks him, and a month later, the group is closing in on the spotlight went missing. However, Garou has no intention of actually fulfilling the terms of the agreement, so as soon as they get there, he plans to attack May and let her die the same way Light did. Once they arrive at the spot, May falls to her knees in despair at the thought of how hopeless Light must have felt back then. Meanwhile, Garou tries to spin a story about Light getting attacked by a monster and falling into a teleportation trap before anyone could save him. But as he is speaking, several of his men begin blocking off the exit so May won't be able to escape once they attack. They are just about to pounce on her. But May suddenly says that if only she had been with Light from the start, then he wouldn't have been tricked and betrayed by such lowlives. As soon as he hears her say that, Garou panics and backs away because no one aside from the other Concord party members and the higher-ups know about what really happened here. He demands to know how she found out about that and accuses her of being a spy from one of the other races, but May feels insulted by that statement. She is and will always be a maid dedicated to serving Lord Light with all her being, and for Garou to suggest that she's anything is a crime punishable by death. Garou feels a terrifying pressure coming from May, and even though she's just a human, his instincts are telling him to get the hell out of here right now. However, just as May was able to lose her cool and plaster the wall with Beastman blood, Light shows up and tells her to stop because Garou is his prey to deal with. Garou and his men were stunned. None of them had heard Light approaching. Garou couldn't believe his eyes. He hadn't even considered the possibility that Light could have survived. Light Casual says he is back to get his revenge, but Garou begins to laugh because he thinks it's hilarious that a level 15 human like Light thinks he is strong enough to get revenge on someone like him who is level 150. Garou has no idea how Light managed to make it this far, but he's sure that if he kills Light and brings him back now, then he will be promoted to chief in no time. Light sighs and asks him if he's really not going to ask him how he managed to survive before resorting to violence, but Garou just assumes Light got lucky and was saved by May after he was teleported, which is actually exactly what happened. Garou orders his men to attack Light, so two immediately charge forward to strike, but before they could get too close, their heads are suddenly divorced from their bodies by May. Garou's remaining men couldn't even keep track of May's movements, so they are starting to freak out. but Garou tells them to calm down because he's sure that was just a fluke. Meanwhile, Light thanks May for taking the initiative to protect him, but he says he can handle things on his own from here, so he just wants her to guard the exit and make sure no one leaves. Garou tells his men there's no need to worry because they can't possibly lose to a pair of inferior humans, but Light is starting to get sick of listening to Garou go on and on about how he is so much better than humans when in reality, he is the weak one here. Garou doesn't believe that for even 1 second, because it is well known that all humans are weak and have little mana compared to the other races, so they could never be weaker than Light. If that's what he truly believes, then Light asks him why 2 of his men have their heads rolling on the floor if they are all stronger than him, but Garou just dismisses that as a careless mistake. He and his goons then proceed to jump at Light, so he calmly closes his eyes and proceeds to dog-walk them while barely lifting a finger. Garou falls to the ground wide-eyed because he just got hit harder than ever before, and he couldn't even see it coming. Light stands over his body and asks him if this is really the best he and his so-called superior race can accomplish, but Garou can't stand the fact that Light is looking down on him, so he decides to use his trump card and smashes a necklace to the ground, summoning a level 500 Fenrir to take care of Light for him. He proudly yells that this is the end of the road for Light, but Light tells him that level 500 is still way too weak to be a challenge for him. Garou thinks Light must have gone insane from fear. There's no way he could possibly defeat a Fenrir on his own. He tells him to get down on his knees and beg if he wants a painless death. Light can see that the power difference here hasn't sunk in yet, so he sets his staff aside and tells Garou he won't move from this spot, so he is free to hit him with his best attack. Garou is still convinced that Light must be bluffing, so he charges up his Fenrir's Howling Beast Blast and hits Light with enough energy to vaporize a small fortress. However, when the dust settles, Light is still standing, unharmed and unmoved. He thinks it's a little embarrassing that Garou was bragging so much about an attack that barely did anything. He also thinks it's weird that Garou keeps calling his summon a Fenrir when it's barely strong enough to be classified as a Fenrir puppy. He then pulls out a summon card and says he will show Garou what a real Fenrir looks like right before summoning a wolf god. This is a level 9000 Fenrir that goes beyond anything Garou has ever seen in his life, and after Light orders it to take care of Garou's summon, it literally just blows some air in the direction of Garou's wolf, and it is suddenly frozen in a block of ice. Seeing Light casually pull out a wolf that was able to no-diff his summon finally makes Garou realize how screwed he is, but Light tells him the wolf god was just for show, because he could have taken care of Garou's summon on his own if he had wanted. And to make the difference in strength absolutely clear, Light enables his status screen to show Garou that he is currently level 9,999. He is absolutely terrified now because he didn't even know levels could go up that high, and he is starting to think that Light is an imposter. But it's not like it matters whether this is the real Light or not, since he's definitely going to kill Garou with how things are going. He throws down his weapons and his pride and begins begging Light to spare his life. He says he was just following his country's orders and he never would have betrayed him otherwise. He looks up, hoping that Light will have mercy on him. But before any of that, Light says he has a few questions for Garou. First, he asks him about the masters that his higher-ups asked him to find, but Garou says he doesn't actually know what they are. Light then asks him why those same higher-ups ordered Garou and the others to kill him after confirming that Light wasn't a master, but Garou really doesn't have any information. He just did as he was told. Light then asks the rest of the beast men if they know anything about the masters, and they all lie that they do in hopes of getting Light to spare them. But in the next moment, May slices them all to bits for daring to state falsehoods in front of Lord Light. Light then turns back to Garou and says he has one final question to ask, but in case he was thinking about lying, he should know that May's eye of judgment can tell whether he is being honest or not, and he won't like what happens if she finds out he is lying. Since Garou's intuition is so sharp, Light asks him if he thinks it would be possible to win a war against the surface nations as he is now. Garou gulps in hesitation, but he eventually tells Light that his incredible strength would certainly give him an advantage early on in the battle, but he would eventually lose. He is still only one person, so winning an entire war against nations that have countless soldiers, weapons, and items at their disposal would be practically impossible. Garou thinks Light will be upset by the answer he just gave, but Light can tell that Garou was telling the truth and he already expected as much. However, he says there's something he wants to show Garou, so he pulls out a teleport card and transports both Garou and May to the throne room. Garou covers his head in fear because he doesn't know what Light has planned for him, but when he opens his eyes, he is left speechless as he sees Light's army in all their glory. Light walks up to his throne, and once he is there, he asks all of his subordinates to display their levels so Garou can see how powerful they truly are. To Garou's horror, he finds out that most of Light's army is above level 5,000, and even the weakest ones are still level 1,500. Now that Garu has seen his true military power, Light asks him if it would be possible to win a war against the surface with an army like this, and the look on his face tells Light all he needs to know. Now that he has confirmed that he can win as a reward, Light says he will forgive Garu for all the pain he caused back then. Psych, Light says he is going to put Garu through constant suffering that will make him beg for death, and Garu knows there is nothing he can do about it, because at this point, Light might as well be a god of destruction. The next day, Light returned to his hometown to find his family and bring them to his dungeon city, but unfortunately, by the time they arrived, all he found waiting for him was a pile of rubble and decaying flesh. Apparently, the village had been destroyed roughly 6 months ago by some unknown forces and no one was spared. Light searches the village for corpses so he can hold a proper funeral for them. And to his relief, he doesn't find any bodies belonging to his siblings, so he believes they must still be alive out there somewhere. However, his parents weren't so lucky. Gold asks Light if he is alright since this must be very difficult for him to process, but he says he will be fine. For now, they need to focus on the mission at hand, so he asks Gold and Nemumu to help gather as much information as possible. While they may now know that their military is strong enough to contend with the world's forces, it would be foolish to march into war right away, so he wants to find out more details regarding the strength of each nation. Additionally, he is fairly certain that the destruction of his hometown had something to do with the fact that he was suspected to be a master, so he wants to find out what a master is and why it is worth shedding so much blood over. If he finds out that this is just a case of some wealthy bastards getting greedy for power, then he swears that he will burn the world to ash and then force-feed the cinders to the people behind all this. Gold understands why Light is so angry, but he warns him to keep his rage in check once they are around other people, because the energy he is releasing could kill a regular person instantly. Light apologizes for the slip-up and pulls out an item called the Fool's Mask to suppress his energy and hide his identity. He then says goodbye to the graves of his mom and dad and apologizes for not being able to save them. He, Nemumu, and Gold then begin flying towards the city of Dagas, but Nemumu is curious since she doesn't know what Light plans to do once they arrive. Just then, Gold tells Nemumu that she should be careful about how she addresses their lord while they are on the surface, and Light explains to her that referring to him by his real name would tip off the people behind Concord, so instead he plans to go by the name Dark while they are on the mission. Nemumu says she understands, and as for what Light plans to do in Dagas, he tells her that he is going to register himself as an adventurer under the name Dark, and as he rises through the ranks, he will be able to gather more and more information from the guild Big Shots. After a little while, Nemumu spots the city of Dagas over the horizon, and they wouldn't want to draw too much attention by flying in, so Light suggests they should land in the forest and walk the rest of the way. Although with Gold's magnificent armor, they are going to stand out either way. As the three are walking through the forest, they come upon a scene of a human tradesman being robbed by a bunch of dwarves, and while they would have preferred to stay out of sight until they got to the city, Gold's armor comes with inbuilt sparkle animations, so the bandits immediately notice him. They then try robbing him as well, but that doesn't go so well for them, and the dwarves are all left tied up in the middle of the road. The two humans are extremely thankful that they have been saved, so they offer to give Light and the others a ride into the city as a gesture of gratitude. Along the way, the man's son talks about how amazing Gold was since he had never seen someone take out dwarves so easily before. The man assumes they must be a famous group of adventurers, but Light tells him they actually aren't even registered yet. The man is shocked to hear this, but he tells them that if they really want to register as adventurers, then Dagas is the right place to go since it has one of the biggest guilds around, and it's right near the border between the elf, dwarf, and human kingdoms. There are a fair number of humans who gather here, so it is one of the more accommodating cities for humanity. He was even able to open up a fairly successful human hotel there, and he invites Light and the others to stay there if they need a place to stay. A little while later, they arrive at Dagas, and Light and the others ask Colonel to drop them off by the city entrance since they want to walk the rest of the way. For Gold and Nemumu, this is their first time actually seeing a surface city, and they notice that there are a lot of shops around that sell armor and weapons, but Light tells them that's just because there are a lot of adventurers here. Not to mention that the Dwarf Kingdom is close by, and those guys specialize in blacksmithing, so of course they'd sell their wares here. Once the group arrives at the guild, Nemumu notices that all the humans seem to scatter whenever someone from a different race walks by, and Light takes that as a sign that humans are treated poorly in this city as well, even if it isn't immediately obvious. He heads to the front desk to register, and as usual, he's required to start out at F rank, so Light is going to have to do a few quests to raise his rank later. But before that, they need to find a place to stay, and Light recalls Colonel mentioning that he owns a hotel, so he and the others decide to head there. Colonel is surprised to see Light again and asks what he can do for him, so Light says he has a special request to make. He tells Colonel that he would like to rent out the entire top floor of this building, and under no circumstances should anyone, even Colonel's staff, be allowed to enter. As payment, he plops a bag full of gold coins down on the table, and Colonel is left speechless because he doesn't know what to say. Light says he can pay more money if this isn't enough, but Colonel tells him this is already 10 times more than enough. He says he can't accept this kind of money from the man who saved his life earlier, but Light insists, so Colonel eventually accepts the generous offer and says he will get the rooms ready as soon as possible. A little while later, Light and the others head upstairs, and he takes out a few perception-blocking spell cards and casts them on the room to ensure that no one will be able to eavesdrop. He can finally relax without having to worry about someone spying on him, so he pulls up a chair and takes a seat so he can rest. While Light is seated, Nemumu speaks up and tells him that while she is aware that he is very powerful, and that he chose to become an adventurer here to gather information, there is always a risk that he might get hurt on the surface, so she thinks it would be safer if Light returned to the dungeon city and let them handle things here on their own. Light is a nice person, but what Nemumu just suggested is basically trying to sideline him in his own revenge plot, and that pisses him off to the extreme because she's essentially saying she thinks he's too incompetent to pull it off. Nemumu immediately realizes that she screwed up, so she begs Light to forgive her insolence, but it's too late for that. He looks like he might actually kill Nemumu for what she said, and Gold can tell that things are getting really tense, so he laughs and tells Light that Nemumu simply doesn't understand the appeal of revenge. He tells her that Light wants to exact his vengeance with his own two hands without any middleman, and that's a noble cause to work towards. Hearing Gold's lighthearted banter makes Light realize that he may have gone too far, so he gets down and apologizes to Nemumu for letting his emotions get the better of him, since he knows she only said that out of concern for his safety. But Nemumu acknowledges that this was her fault for stepping out of line with her comments, so she begs him to allow her to pledge her allegiance to him once more. Light really doesn't think that's necessary, but he agrees to let her do it anyway, so Nemumu gently lifts his foot and kisses it. In this world, a kiss to the foot is the greatest show of respect one can show towards a leader, but Light has never really been a fan of this custom, especially with how awkward it was to have all his subordinates kiss his feet one after the other when he first summoned them. Even Gold acknowledges that it's kind of weird, especially since Nemumu looks like she's enjoying it way too much. The next morning, Light and the others head for the dungeon, and as they are walking through town, a lot of people start to stare because Gold has more bling than a SoundCloud rapper, and Nemumu looks really pretty. Although the only thing they have to say about Light is that he looks weird in that mask, but that does fit his dark persona, so it doesn't bother him. There's a long line of people waiting to get into the dungeon, but Gold notices that there don't seem to be any elves here at all. Light tells him that's because the elves and the dwarves are currently in a dispute over who owns this dungeon, so they tend to avoid each other. Nemumu praises Light for always having the perfect answer to any question, and he appreciates the compliment, but he asks her if she really needs to stand so close all the time because her chest is squishing up against the back of his head. She tells him it's her job to keep him safe at all times, so she needs to be as close as possible, and before Light can argue, he notices 3 people cut in front of the line. The little one is most likely a servant, and the second one seems like someone with moderate training, but as for the guy in front, Light can tell that he carries all of his movements are sharp and precise, even with the bulky weapon on his back. He is without a doubt a seasoned fighter, and a few of the other humans are too scared to confront him, since they probably get cut down for speaking. However, Light doesn't have to worry about that, so he confronts the elf and tells him it's rude to cut in line like that. The elf becomes enraged when he realizes a human is daring to speak to him, so he reaches for his sword, but the elder he's with tells him it's not worth causing a commotion or something like this, so the warrior agrees to go to the back of the line. However, as he walks past Light, he warns him that he will make sure he regrets disrespecting him like that. Once the elf is gone, the rest of the humans in line praise Light for standing up to that bully, and the kids from earlier come over to personally thank him since they couldn't work up the courage to do so. Light tells them there's no need to thank him since he was only doing it out of self-interest, but they are still thankful. Just then, one of the kids speaks up and asks Gold if his armor is really made out of gold since everyone here is curious, but before Gold can say anything, Nemumu tells them that none of Gold's armor is actually made of gold, otherwise it'd be too weak to offer any protection. The kid is then about to ask if Gold is just wearing it for attention then, but his friends stop him because it'd be a rude question to ask. However, Gold explains that he really does just wear it for attention, since there's no better color to represent the shining example he sets as a knight. The kids ask Light and the others if this is their first time heading into the dungeon, and Light confirms this, but he asks them how they knew. The kids explain that this floor is quite expansive, so adventurers often have to camp inside, but Light's party didn't bring any camping gear with them, so he figured they must have never been inside before. Just then, the guard calls for the next party to head inside, so the kids say goodbye and run into the dungeon together. Meanwhile, Light and the others are wondering if they should start carrying fake luggage around, since even though they have everything they need stored in an item box, they wouldn't want people mistaking them for noobs. A little while later, it's their turn to enter the dungeon, and this is Light's first time entering one aside from the abyss. Dungeons are filled with mana that gets stronger the deeper you go, and it often leads to the creation of things like monsters and traps, so the inside of a dungeon is practically its own world. Once they arrive on the first floor, Light casts concealment magic on all of them so enemies can't track them down, and they all start flying towards the second floor. Meanwhile, that elf from before is busy taking his anger out on a bunch of orcs because he can't believe a human would dare to speak to him in such a manner. His name is Keto, and he says he is a legendary hero from the Elf Kingdom with the blood of a master flowing through his veins, so he deserves respect. He says that would never have happened if his level wasn't so low, but Yenny tells him that a level of 1,500 is already way higher than the usual level cap for elves, but Keto says it's not enough because he needs enough power to obliterate all the fools who mocked him. Yenny tells him he sympathizes because he also wants to get revenge on the idiots who refused to acknowledge his research and exiled him, so he would be more than happy to use that research to help Keto level up even further. Meanwhile, Light and the others have already made it down to the third floor, and they just finished dealing with a large horde of orcs. Light suggests they should start heading back now since they've gotten enough proof for the guild already, and that fight left him pretty dirty, so he wants to take a bath. As soon as Nemu hears that, she offers to wash every inch of Light's body for him once they get back, but he doesn't respond. On the way back, Light and the others run into the kids from earlier, so they head down to meet up with them, but all of a sudden they hear a lot of noise coming from the forest and dozens of wolves come running out. The kids tell Light they need to retreat since they won't be able to fight the wolves, but Light tells them the wolves aren't what they need to worry about because there's an even bigger threat heading their way, a giant quad-scythe mantis. The kids can't believe what they are seeing since the mantis monster species was supposedly exterminated 10 years ago, and there's no way they can handle one on their own. The leader asks Mia to try hitting the mantis with some magic as a distraction, but he knows that won't be enough, so he desperately turns Light and the others and asks them to help disorient the monster so they can all escape together. However, after hearing that the kids plan on retreating, Light asks if that means they won't mind if he takes it for himself. The kids think he's crazy because a mantis like that has got to be at least level 500, but Light tells them there's no need to worry because he and his friends are more than capable of dealing with it. Gold steps up to take the first swing at it, and to his surprise, the mantis is actually able to block a bunch of his strikes without suffering much damage, so its claws must be sturdier than he thought. Light decides to go up next and launches a fire arrow straight at the mantis, but before it could connect, the mantis parried it and sent it right back at Light. As the kids watch this, they think Light and the others are in trouble, so they ask Mia to hurry up with her attack magic, but she's way too excited about what Light just did to focus. He just used combat-grade magic without having to use an incantation, and she didn't even know that was possible. The others don't know much about magic, so they can't tell what counts as impressive or not, but they Light and his friends. However, Gold tells them they are better off sitting this one out, and as an added bonus, he says he will give them a little lesson about what it means to be a knight. For one, he tells them that a shield doesn't need to be limited to just defense, and as the mantis attacks him, he turns around and perfectly parries its attack, shattering the mantis's claw in the process. He then tells them that a knight must never miss an opportunity to strike. So while the mantis is still reeling from the pain of losing its claw, Gold rushes behind it and chops off one of its legs. Light then comes in with more fire arrows, but this time as the mantis deflects them, the arrows simply change trajectory and fly into its back. Light has taken control of the arrows, so now, no matter what the mantis does, they will always hit their mark. All of the mantis' limbs are eventually blown off, and it realizes it stands no chance at defeating Light, so it books it back towards the forest, and Light is surprised that it is smart enough to decide to retreat. But he's not going to let it escape after all this. He casts a firewall in front of the mantis to stop it from getting to the forest, and Mia is absolutely losing her mind because she has never seen anyone use such widespread tactical magic instantly like that. There's nowhere left for the mantis to run, but it's still got its wings, so it takes off into the sky as a final escape attempt. However, before it could flee, Nembumu leaped up after it and diced it to pieces midair. After she returns to the ground, Gold tells her that she messed up, and this gets under her skin because she thought she was doing exactly what Light wanted by destroying the mantis, but Gold points out that she also destroyed all the valuable parts, so now there's no way for them to sell any of it when they get back to town. Nembumu soon realizes she really did mess up, so she immediately starts begging Light for forgiveness, but he says it's not a big deal. Meanwhile, the kids are all standing off to the side, wondering whether they really just saw a human defeat a quad-scythe mantis or if they hallucinated the entire thing. A few minutes later, while sifting through all the mantis goo, the kids happen to find its magic gem, and by sheer luck, it's still in one piece, so Light will be able to submit it as proof of his accomplishment. But before he leaves, one of the kids approaches him and asks if he is from a famous party of adventurers or something because he seems way too strong to be a newbie. However, Light informs them that they are all indeed F-rankers, and the kids don't know what to believe anymore. Now that the fight is over, Mia uses her magic to create a water ball and offers to let Light use it to wash the mantis goo off himself. Light is grateful that she would use her precious mana to allow him to wash himself, but she says this is the least she could do. Since it's getting late, the leader asks Light and the others if they would like to camp out with them for the night. Partially because it's dangerous to roam around once it gets dark, but also due to the fact that Mia really wants to talk about magic with Light. And since there's no harm in it, Light agrees to stay. While the group is eating, Mia asks Light all sorts of questions about his past, but he can't exactly reveal his plans to her. So he makes up a fake backstory and says both of his parents were powerful mages, which is why he is so good at casting magic without incantations. That makes sense to Mia, but her brother says he still doesn't understand why it's so impressive. After hearing him say that, she goes on a long rant about how incredible Light's magic was. There are three main classes of magic, namely the combat class, magic that can be used on a single target, tactical class, magic that affects a wide area, like the firewall Light used before. And finally, there's strategic magic, which has the potential to affect the world on a global scale. It includes things like creating earthquakes or meteorite strikes, but it usually requires a group of elite mages pooling their mana together and reciting incantations to pull that off. For the other races, casting advanced spells is easy, but humans, on the other hand, are rarely able to achieve such a thing. That's why she was so amazed that a human like Light could pull off such a feat. Mia's brother still doesn't understand much about magic, but from what Mia has said, he can tell that Light must be truly incredible. However, he tells Mia to give herself some credit as well since her magic was good enough to earn her a referral to the Magic Academy from the Duchy. This gets Light's attention, so he asks if they are referring to the one in charge of the nation formed jointly by all 9 races, the Principality of 9. Mia confirms this, and Gold acknowledges that she must be a talented mage to have been recognized by the Principality. Mia's brother agrees, but unfortunately, both of their parents passed away from a plague, so she couldn't afford to attend the academy, and they were forced to create an adventuring party with 2 of their childhood friends, Jimra and Wordy, just so they could get by. Right now, their goal is to earn enough money from exploring dungeons to send Mia to the academy, but Mia says she's happy just getting to spend time with them, so they don't need to push themselves too far for her sake. Her brother assures her that he won't do anything reckless, and seeing Mia and her brother talk like this reminds Light a lot of the time he used to spend with his little sister. Just then, Mia and her brother ask Light why he decided to become an adventurer, so he makes up a story and tells them his parents died in a fire, and he was left with severe burns, so he is searching for a magic potion to heal himself. That sounds really rough, so no one knows what to say anymore, and Jimra doesn't like all the tension, so he gets up and asks if Gold and Nemumu are dating. Nemumu immediately becomes defensive and says she would never date someone like Gold, and Gold is much calmer about it. But he says he has no interest in a woman as immature as Nemumu. While those two are arguing, elsewhere in the dungeon, Kido is busy cutting down orcs to get Yannick the research samples he needs for his experiment to surpass the level caps imposed on each race. And now that he has enough magic material ready, he says all he needs is a human guinea pig, and Kido knows exactly who he wants to hunt down for the experiment. Some time goes by and Light heads to the guild to exchange his latest haul of magic stones. A large crowd forms around him because they've never seen someone return with so many magic gems. After Light and the others defeated the Mantis, they earned quite the name for themselves in the city, and people now call their party Black Motley. The receptionists have started treating them a lot better lately, and Light is happy to be receiving all this attention since it was his goal from the beginning. As he and the others are walking towards the dungeon, he is suddenly called out to by a man on the road, and Nemumu immediately becomes defensive, but the guy says he isn't looking to cause any trouble. He says his name is Sullivan, and his buddy over here is Gilbert. They heard that Light and his party were able to defeat a quad-sized mantis and made it all the way down to the 5th door, so when he saw him walking by, he just had to talk to him. Just then, the rest of Gilbert and Sullivan's party tells them it's time to head into the dungeon, so they say goodbye to Light and head inside. Light thinks it's nice that he is giving hope to the other humans in town, but there is no shortage of other races who are envious of Light's power and believe he is a fraud. He kind of expected them to refuse to accept his accomplishments, but he's just going to have to force them to acknowledge him by showing undeniable results. Once he enters the dungeon, he tells Gold and Nemumu that he plans to head back down to the 5th floor today, but before that, he happens to spot the kids from before, so he decides to head down to say hello. Mia and the others are surprised to see Light since it has been a while since they last ran into each other, but Mia's brother says this is perfect timing since there's something Mia has been wanting to give him. Mia is a little nervous about it at first, but she hands Light a little clamshell with some ointment she made herself. She remembers him mentioning that he has severe burns all over his body, so she made it to help relieve the pain a little. Light is really grateful for the kind gesture, though it does make him feel a little bad for lying to her about having burns. To make up for it, he decides to return the favor and pulls out one of his items as a gift from Mia. It's a bracelet, and it looks really nice, so Mia isn't sure she should be accepting something that's so valuable. Light tells her that her gift really warmed his heart, so he wants her to have it as his way of returning the favor. She happily accepts the gift and tells Light she will treasure it forever, but after Light and the others depart, Imumu asks him if he's sure it was wise to give her an SS-class item so casually. That bracelet was a wishing bracelet, and depending on the will of the weather, it can make a small miracle come true, so Light figured it would be a great gift for someone like Mia. A little while later, they arrive on the 5th floor, and it is absolutely covered in snow. This works out in their favor since the snow will act as great cover, so Light tells Gold and Nemumu that they are in charge of hunting Yenis while he's gone, and then he activates a teleportation item, sending him back to his throne room in the dungeon city. There he has a nice cup of tea and asks his team how the revenge operations are coming along. Ellie tells him that she has almost gotten everything ready, so they will be able to move on to the next phase before much longer. Light is happy to hear that, so he tells Ellie she is free to use whatever resources she needs to make sure things progress smoothly, and in the meantime, he would like Mei to continue managing affairs here in the Abyss and Akuki to continue scouting. Just then, Mizuna asks him if there's anything he wants her to do in the meantime, and Light doesn't really know what to say because Mizuna is pretty useless when it comes to anything other than defeating monsters, but he also doesn't want to make her feel left out, so he says she is to remain on standby to protect the city in case a powerful bad guy shows up. That's good enough for her, so she swears that no one will get hurt on her watch, and Light can't wait for the day that his plan can go into action because he wants to savor the miserable look on Sasha's face when he confronts her. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the dungeon, Gilbert and Sullivan had set up camp and were keeping watch while their party members slept. At one point, Sullivan needed to go pee, so he stepped in the forest for a moment, but by the time he came back, he saw Gilbert's decapitated head lying on the ground with Keto standing over him. The other two were also killed in their sleep, and Keto makes it clear that he is doing this out of pure hatred for the human species as a whole. Sullivan is enraged by what Keto has done, but he is smart enough to know that he stands no chance against him. So he throws down a smoke bomb and starts running away so he can make it back to the guild to report what happened. He thinks he has a good shot of escaping since most magic is useless unless you know where your opponent is. However, he suddenly gets hit in the back with something, and as he looks up, he sees Keto riding on a magical hoverboard. He is then knocked out a moment later by Yannick, and he scolds Keto for killing all the humans since he was very specific about capturing them alive. Kaido doesn't see the problem since it shouldn't matter if he killed a few lowly humans, and it's not like Yannick actually cared about their lives either, but he needs as many test subjects as possible because his research is currently unstable and Sullivan is bound to die from side effects long before Yannick perfects it. So they need to find some more human guinea pigs. This was the end of episode 5. Subscribe to not miss the next part. Today is the awakening ceremony for the village children's job classes, and people had incredibly high hopes for Errol since his mom was a high-class sword princess and his dad was an archmage, so he is bound to get something good. However, when it's his turn to be touched by the priest, instead of seeing visions of his job title, all he sees is the color white. The priest is stunned because this almost never happens, but in cases like this, it could only mean one thing. The priest announces that just like a disappointed college graduate in the job market, Errol is going to be chronically unemployed. Classes are blessings bestowed on an individual that allow you to specialize in a job and acquire skills to improve yourself, so it's a really big deal. His parents and sister spent all morning glazing the hell out of Errol because they thought you would receive a legendary class, so imagine how shocked they were to hear that he is due to be jobless. But regardless, they do still love their boy, so they start canceling their retirement plans and tell Errol that he can just mooch off of them and live in their basement for the rest of his life if he wants. However, Errol says he has no interest in becoming a basement dweller. Everyone seems to think he's going to become a bum since he's classless, but he honestly doesn't think it's a big deal. Sure, it would have been nice to have gotten a cool job that would make him strong immediately, but he has still been learning how to use a sword with his mom for years at this point, and the fact that she hasn't accidentally killed him with her overwhelming force yet must mean he has been getting better, so he's not discouraged. Even if it's going to take more work than usual to achieve the same results as others, he's willing to keep trying until he becomes just as strong as his parents. Errol's family members are all happy to see that he hasn't lost hope yet, so they start glazing him, saying he will definitely become famous in the future. And Errol appreciates it, but he really needs to get back to training, so he heads out into the fields by himself. There he hears the sound of swords clashing nearby, so he goes to check it out and spots two children from the village in the middle of a duel to test out their new sword classes. Soon enough, one of the boys notices Errol watching them from the corner over there, and they ask him what he's doing here since this isn't a place for a classless loser like him. Errol says there are no rules against him coming here to train, so he'd just like to practice in peace. But the kids seem really intent on establishing dominance over Errol, so they say they'll be nice and show him what a sword class wielder can do. The two of them begin sparring with one another again in front of Errol. He is kind of impressed. Don't get me wrong, their technique is laughable at best, but Errol does think it's intriguing how effective sword skills really are. The first skill anyone with a sword class receives is called basic swordsmanship, and it allows you to swing a sword decently well even if you've never held one in your life, which is clearly the case for these two. He thinks he might actually be able to get some good practice if he goes up against them, so he interrupts and says he'd like to have a duel with them. The kids are offended by the fact that Errol thinks he would stand a chance against them even though he's classless, so they'd agree to the match. But just to make sure, the first kid asks Errol if he has his divine protection. A divine protection is a blessing that everyone in this world is born with, and it basically creates a shield around your body to absorb damage up to a certain extent. Errol informs them that he does have a divine protection, and the boys are relieved to hear that since it means they don't have to worry about accidentally killing Errol during their duel. The first one steps up and charges at Errol, fully expecting to overwhelm him with his initial strike, but to his surprise, Errol is actually holding his ground really well. No matter what he does, he can't find a single weakness in Errol's technique to exploit. He signals for his friend to come over so they can jump Errol, but he sees it coming and jumps out of the way in time. Mostly because the second kid was yelling during his sneak attack. The swordsman class may have given them decent sword skills, but it can't do anything about plain old stupidity, so these two wouldn't be able to come up with a decent attack plan even if their lives depended on it. Either way, he thinks this is a great opportunity to challenge himself by fighting two opponents at once, so he charges towards them, but within seconds he has already knocked them out, and it wasn't as hard as he thought it would be. Any reasonable person would have admitted defeat here, but the boys say they haven't lost yet because, nah, that one didn't count. Just then, a red-haired child shows up, and he tells the two of them to stop whining because on a real battlefield, there are no second chances. Red hair seems to be pretty well known since the boy don't bother arguing with him, and as he walks up to Errol, he tells him that his skill with a sword is remarkable for a classless bum like him. But the only reason he won that match was because he was up against those weaklings, so now Red Hair wants to fight Errol to prove that he is superior. The boys inform Errol that Red Hair is the son of Captain Evans, the village's head guard, and Errol happens to know Evans since he used to show up at their house every so often to ask Errol's mom to help him hunt demons. But to be honest, Red Hair looks nothing like Evans, so Errol briefly considers calling him adopted, but he doesn't want to make him any angrier than he already is. Redhead is only doing this because he thinks his father is the greatest, but everyone else in the village says Errol's mom is stronger, which is true by the way, but Redhead can't accept that. He wants to make it clear that he isn't lazy like those two over there. He awakened his sword skills a year ago and has never skipped a single day of training, so even though he is young, he has already attained some intermediate level sword skills. He believes the skills of parents are inherited by their children, so he is here to prove once and for all that his dad is the best by beating Errol. But Errol calls him out on his BS, because none of what he said made any sense. He's obviously just angry that Errol's mom can beat up his dad, and he's trying to take it out on him, but Errol is always down for a good challenge, so he accepts the duel. The duel begins shortly after, and the two start clashing blades with incredible speed. The other two boys watch on from the sidelines, and they are astonished by the fact that Errol is able to keep up with an intermediate swordsman like Redhead. After fighting for a few minutes, Errol can tell that Redhead is a lot stronger than the other two, but his anger is clouding his judgment, so after one wide swing, Redhead is left completely open, and he plans to take full advantage of that. He closes the distance and aims for Redhead's neck, but at the last second, Redhead uses one of his skills to counter. Errol manages to block the initial strike, but the second slash hits him in the gut and sends him flying into a brick wall. Redhead is surprised that Errol actually managed to block one of the slashes at such close range, but he still got hit in the end, so it's Redhead's victory. Errol asks for an explanation, so Redhead tells him that what he just used was called Twin Blade, and it is an attack skill that allows him to perform 2 strikes in one swing. He admits that Errol is way better than he thought he would be, and he respects him for it, but there's no way someone who is classless like him would ever be able to defend against a sword skill like that. However, Errol takes that as a personal challenge and swears he will find a way to overcome it. A few days later, Errol's sister comes into his room to wake him up, but he really isn't much of a morning person, so he just ignores her and goes back to sleep. However, Astaire then threatens to kiss him if he doesn't wake up, and that's enough to get him out of bed. They both head to the kitchen to grab some breakfast, and Astaire is still trying to kiss Errol, but his mom doesn't seem to mind since it's not incest if you're not blood related. However, in this case, those two really are blood related, so this is definitely incest. Once everyone has had their meal, Astaire asks Errol if he plans to go to his special training session again today, and he confirms it, but she doesn't understand why he has been pushing himself so hard lately. She tells him he should take a break every once in a while, but Errol doesn't plan on resting until he has become the best, so once he's done with breakfast, he heads out to continue his training. Astaire is starting to get really worried about him since he's been coming home late every day since he got beaten up at the training grounds, but Farah is sure that Errol is capable of taking care of himself, so there's no need for them to worry. She takes Astaire out back and shows her a chest full of broken swords. These are all the blades that Errol has been using to train, and you can tell by how worn out they all are that Errol is putting a lot of effort into getting stronger, so they should let him work as hard as he wants to. Meanwhile, out in the forest, Errol is using a tree to test out his new move since he thinks he has finally perfected it. He had to let the redhead hit him with it a lot so he could figure out how it works, but he eventually got it down, so he can use twin blade slash at will now. All this while, a goblin has been watching Errol from the bushes, and even though it just saw what Errol is capable of, it uses the logic of my ranked teammates and decides to attack him alone. Errol spots the goblin and easily slashes it across the chest before its body could even hit the ground. Just then, Errol hears the growl of a large monster somewhere else in the forest, and it sounds pretty big, so he's about to retreat to call for backup. But just as he is about to leave, he hears the voice of a kid being attacked by the monster. He doesn't have time to call for help anymore since it might be too late to save the kid by the time he returns, so instead he charges forward to handle it himself. He eventually arrives at the spot where he heard the screaming, and he finds Redhead pinned up against a tree by a hobgoblin. He is severely injured, so Errol needs to save him, but he can't rush in carelessly since the hobgoblin is still a major threat. He patiently waits while the monster closes in on Redhead, and just as it's about to finish him off, Errol sees an opening, so he hits it with a twin-bladed slash, killing it instantly. Redhead is still badly injured, so Errol shares some of his standard issue holy water with him so he can recover. He feels a lot better now and thanks Errol for sharing his holy water, but now that that's out of the way, he demands to know how the hell Errol managed to do that. Twin and slash is a complex move that can only be achieved by using a skill. Errol admits that it definitely is complex, but all he needed to do was figure out the patterns and timing, and he was able to replicate it pretty easily. In fact, he should probably be thanking Redhead since it's only because he kept using it over and over that Errol was able to figure out how to perform the technique. Redhead can't believe it, but even if Errol was able to replicate the technique without his skill, he is still certain that his skill-based attack must be stronger, so he asks Errol to have another sparring match with him right here. The two face off against each other, and just as expected, Errol is able to match Redhead's twin slash. But not only that, he even goes a step further and throws in a third slash which catches Redhead off guard and knocked him off his feet. It's called twin and slash for a reason, so it should be possible for him to launch 3 slashes at the same time, but since Errol isn't using a skill to perform the slashes, so there's no real limit on how many he can perform. Redhead is floored at the realization that Errol is simply better than him, and Errol walks away confident that he has asserted his dominance. A few days later, Errol is having dinner with his family, and Farah mentions that Evans' child has decided to go to Brescia, the city of swords, to train for some reason. Errol realizes he's probably the reason the redhead suddenly decided to leave town for training, but the city of swords sounds pretty interesting, so he is considering heading there as well. A few years later, Errol eventually decides to jump on a carriage headed for Brescia, and in that same carriage he meets a man and a woman headed there as well. The man is a barbarian and the woman is a dual sword wielder, so she asks the man to team up with her, but he immediately declines since he hates working with people who fight with flashy clothes on. The woman gets offended and tells the man that her class is focused on speed and evasion, so there's no reason for her to bother getting any heavy armor. Plus, this dress comes in handy since most of her opponents would be too busy staring at her opai to fight properly. The two are about to launch into a full-blown argument over this, but all of a sudden, the driver interrupts to tell them they both have amazing advanced classes, and he'd really appreciate it if they could put those classes to use right now, because they are in a bit of trouble. The two look forward and realize that the path is being blocked by a horde of orcs, and there's no way to get around them. The barbarian immediately starts freaking out because it'd take an entire party to handle a horde this large, and he knows damn well that he doesn't have what it takes to solo them, so he pushes past the helpless mother and son in the carriage and hightails it out of there. The dual wielder also runs off since she has no intention of risking her life for others, so it looks like everyone else in the cart is doomed. Or at least that would have been the case if Errol weren't here. He runs out to confront the horde and begins cutting them down one after another. The driver is impressed because he can tell that Errol just used the blink step skill, and it is an incredibly versatile skill. But it's practically useless if the user gets surrounded, so he wonders what Errol plans to do in this situation. As the orcs close in on him, he begins spinning around as he executes quick and efficient slashes, and the driver can't believe what he's seeing because Errol is clearly using the sword dance skill. But that's a skill exclusive to the Sword Princess class, and that class can only be obtained by women. Shortly thereafter, Errol stabs the Orc King in the head, putting an end to the battle, and all the others are incredibly thankful for his hard work. Once he returns, the kid in the back asks Errol what class he has because his skills are amazing, but everyone is shocked to find out that he doesn't have one. 5 years ago, after Errol first learned how to use the twin blade skill, his mother had trouble believing what she saw at first. She had completely convinced herself that Errol was doomed to be a bum for the rest of his life because he was classless, but he explains that he is able to naturally learn skills through practice and hard work. On that note, he asked her if she'd be willing to show him some of her Sword Princess skills, so if he could try learning those, and after that, he'd like to head to Brescia to train for a while. However, his mother wasn't really paying attention to most of what he said because she was so overjoyed by the fact that her son isn't going to be a loser after all, so she ran inside to tell the others. Back to the present, the carriage has just arrived at the gates of Brescia, so the driver wakes Errol up and tells him they've arrived at his destination. There are a lot of swordsmen here, as well as many other advanced classes, so Errol could probably learn a lot here. But before he leaves, he asks the driver if he has an advanced class as well. He tries to avoid the question by reiterating that he's just a driver, but a regular driver wouldn't have been able to accurately identify Errol's sword skills so easily, so there's clearly something special about him. The driver eventually admits that he actually possesses the Holy Knight class, but he occasionally works as a driver to take a break from all the fighting that comes with his job. He can tell that this is Errol's first time in a big city, so he advises him to go join one of the guilds as soon as he can. Most of the swordsmen here live off winnings from the battle tournament, and you can't join the tournament without a guild. Although he warns Errol to be careful about which guild he joins because there can be some nasty ones out there. After the driver leaves, Errol heads into the city to find a guild to join, and a bunch of them seem to be recruiting, but he wants to make sure he picks the best one. All of a sudden, a blonde girl sneaks up behind Errol, and she attempts to bump into him so she has an excuse to start a conversation. But Errol's too good for that, so she ends up faceplanting into the concrete. She can't believe he actually managed to avoid her without even looking, but that just means he must be really talented, so she gets up and says she has an offer for him. Basically, she asks Errol to join her guild and pulls out an enrollment contract for him to sign, but he immediately tells her he's not interested. Sure, he wants to join a guild, but if she's using desperate tactics like this, then her guild must suck big time. Errol was completely right about the girl's guild, but she still wants him to join, so she offers to go on a date with him if he agrees to join. But Errol tells her she's just as flat as his sister, so he has no interest in going out on a date with her. He then gets ready to leave, but before he does, he asks her if she can point him in the direction of a guild that's actually good. The girl can't believe Errol is really asking her for directions after calling her guild trash, but she's a nice person, so she tells him the best guild around here is the Black Blade Guild, and their building is over there. Errol follows her directions and eventually finds the Black Blade Guild office, but there's a long line out front of people who want to join, so he's going to have to wait a while. Once it's his turn, the clerk tells him that he will need to register for an aptitude test to join, and to take the test, he needs to have an advanced class. However, when Errol tells him that he is classless, the clerk practically bursts out in laughter and tells his bum to get out of line because he's never going to be allowed to take the test as a classless loser. Errol asks him if he could make an exception just this once since he's sure he'd be able to pass the test if they let him take it, but the clerk tells him rules are rules, so Errol is forced to leave. He then proceeds to attempt to apply to every guild in the city, and unfortunately, the advanced skill of lying to the recruiter doesn't work here since as soon as they checked his card and found out he was classless, they all rejected him. It's clear that no guild is going to accept Errol at this rate, but then he recalls that his mom wrote him a recommendation letter before he left. She told him that if he took it to Reformer Guild, then they'd definitely let him join, so Errol decides to start searching for the place. Just then, Lilia comes up to him again and asks if he's willing to join her guild now, but Errol still has no interest in working with her. She begs him to reconsider since her guild is on the verge of being disbanded since they don't have enough members, but Errol says that's not his problem. Lilia is getting really desperate here, so she gets down on the ground and starts begging Errol to just join. She even offers to lick the dirt off his boots if he agrees to it. But by the time she looks up, Errol is already gone. and the crowd of people nearby is laughing at her pitiful display. Errol has been walking for a while now, and he should be close to his mom's old guild by now, but he's not sure which building it is. Just then, Lily shows up again and asks Errol to at least come visit her guild since it's really close by. In fact, she can see it from here, so she points over at the building, and Errol is surprised because it actually looks pretty nice. He asks why Lilia is so desperate to get new members if the guild is so well established, and essentially, Lilia's guild used to be famous, but a lot of stuff happened, and now it's a shell of its former glory. In fact, they are pretty much the weakest out of all the guilds right now, but she assures Errol that the Dragon Fang Guild will rise to the top again. Errol is shocked to find out that Lilia's guild is called Dragon Fang, because that's also the name of his mom's former guild, so this is a huge coincidence. He is no longer opposed to listening to Lilia's proposal, so he follows her inside and she leads him to the waiting room so they can discuss things. However, her dad happens to be in here, and he's an absolute mess right now. He notices that Lilia brought another newbie to sign up, but he tells Errol that he shouldn't waste his time here because this guild is done for. He then walks out before Lilia has a chance to say anything to him, so she explains to Errol that her dad used to be one of the top 2 swordsmen in Brescia, but he hasn't been the same since the day he lost his arm. She is sure that seeing the guild leader in such a pitiful state must have made Errol lose faith in the Dragon Fang Guild, but to her surprise, Errol says he'd still like to join. She asks him if he's sure he really wants to join them, but it's not like any other guild would accept him, so this is his only option. That's good enough for Lilia, so she pulls out the enrollment contract and gives it to Errol so he can sign. Once that's done, Errol is officially a member of the Dragon Fang Guild, but Lilia realizes that she never actually asked him what his class was, so she looks at the form Errol filled out and sees that he wrote classless down. At first, she thinks Errol must be joking, so she asks him to take this a little more seriously, but he tells her he is being dead serious and even shows her his ID as proof. Lilia goes silent after realizing that Errol really is classless, and then she proceeds to threaten to beat him up unless he rescinds his contract right now. Errol calmly asks her why, but it's common sense that no guild would want a classless nobody among their ranks. She was so happy to have finally found a new member for the guild, but if Errol really is classless, then he's going to be useless in the tournament. So what's she going to do? Just then, the guild's other member, Lena, happens to walk in and Lilia goes crying to her about how the new guy turned out to be classless, but as soon as she hears the word classless, she knows exactly who Lilia must be talking about. She asks Errol what he's doing here, but Errol says he doesn't have to explain himself to a stranger. Lena can't believe Errol doesn't remember her after all that time they spent training together in the village, but he still insists that he has never met her before because he would remember training with someone as beautiful as her. Lena gets flustered by Errol calling her beautiful, but now that he thinks about it, he does recall training with someone who had the same red hair as Lena, but that was Captain Evans' son. Lena tells Errol that Evans only ever had a daughter, and that daughter is her, so he now realizes that she really was the redhead he trained with back then. He apologizes for not recognizing her, but in his defense, she looks really different now, and as he says this, he is making direct eye contact with her Opai. She has been training here for the past 5 years to make sure she'd never lose to Errol again, and since he's here, she challenges him to a friendly match so she can show him how much she has grown. Errol is always ready for a fight, so the two head to the training center, and as the match begins, Lena launches a twin blade slash at him. Errol attempts to counter with a twin slash of his own, but as the slashes collide, Lena's attack still manages to hit him. He doesn't understand what just happened, so Lena explains that while he may be able to copy her skill, she has gotten a lot stronger thanks to her training, so her attacks are at least 5 times stronger than his. Errol is impressed by how much Lena has grown, but if strength is her main advantage, then he just needs to avoid getting hit. Lena charges in to attack again, but when she strikes at Errol, he dodges her attack so fast that it leaves an afterimage. She recognizes this as the Supreme Shadow Sword skill, and she can't believe Errol managed to learn something like that on his own, but he basically just learned how to move really fast. Now there's no way Lena can lay a finger on Errol, and soon after, he knocks her out by countering one of her attacks and redirecting the force back at her. Errol is clearly the winner of the duel, and Lena tries to act like it doesn't bother her, but she starts bawling her eyes out as soon as she leaves the room because she can't believe Errol is still stronger than her after she spent 5 years training. Errol and Lilia decided to give Lena some time to cool off, so they head back to the meeting room, and once they're there, Errol asks Lilia for a little more detail regarding the guild's situation. Long story short, she explains that their guild is in a lot of debt, and they need to win the next tournament to get enough money to pay it off, but at least 3 members are required to participate, which is why she was so desperate to get someone to join. Given the circumstances, Errol wonders why Lena chose to stick around this long, so Lilia explains that when Lena first arrived in the city, all the big guilds rejected her because they didn't want to have to train a kid, but Lilia's dad took her in spite of her age, and ever since then, she has been a loyal member of the guild. Anyway, regarding the guild's current situation, Errol doesn't think they need to worry too much since everything will be resolved as long as they win the tournament. Granted, they'll have to fight teams of 5 with a team of only 3, but he enjoys a good challenge. The next morning, Earl wakes up and meets with Lena and Lilia to discuss the next step for the guild, and now that everyone is here, Lilia announces that since Dragon Fang has finally acquired 3 members, they have enough people to participate in the team battle, so they will be entering the guild competition this weekend. She goes on to explain that the tournament is organized in one-on-one elimination rounds and each team is limited to a maximum of 5 members. Lena is a little worried since they'll be going in with only 3 members, but Lilia assures her that it shouldn't be too hard since she and Lena are both B rank, so as long as they don't get set up against an A ranker, they should be fine. This is the first time Aurel is hearing of this ranking system, so Lilia gives him a quick rundown and explains that there are a total of 4 ranks detailing the strength of an individual swordsman. Out of the 500 swordsmen in Brescia, there are only around 20 who are classified as A rank, while Lena and Lilia fall in B rank. Aurel isn't ranked yet, but since he was able to beat Lena, Lilia assumes he must be at least B rank as well, so as long as they don't get unlucky with the match placements, they have a decent shot at winning. Speaking of which, the match brackets should have been posted on the Colosseum's notice board by now, so Lilia says she's going to take a look at them right now. In the meantime, Lena gets up to go do some training until Lilia gets back, but before she could leave, Errol calls her back because he has a favor to ask. First of all, since she's a power bladesman, he asks if she has any other skills aside from simple brute strength, and she responds, telling him that she has a skill called Guts, which essentially makes her divine protection last longer than usual. Aurel gives it some serious thought and comes to the conclusion that the Guts skill would be an incredible asset to him in battle, so he goes up to Lena and asks her to hit him over and over. Lena starts blushing and asks if they can try something a little more normal since she thinks Aurel is asking to do something really kinky, but he says she's misunderstanding him. The reason he wants her to hit him is because he assumes the Guts skill is just an ability that raises your endurance, so the best way for him to reproduce it would be by learning to take hits without using his divine protection. Lena is shocked when she hears Aurel's plan and calls him crazy because everyone knows skills are blessings from the goddess that are dependent on your class, but Aurel reminds her that she has already seen him recreate the Twin Blade and Shadow skills, so who's to say he can't replicate the Guts skill as well? To prove it, he asks her to hand over her sword for a second, and she agrees to give it to him. But she doesn't understand what he intends to do with it, since this thing was custom made to be 5 times heavier than a regular sword, so there should be no way he could handle it without the brute strength skill. However, Aurel proves her wrong by effortlessly unsheathing and swinging the blade around. She asks how he's doing that, so he explains that while the brute strength skill does make you stronger than normal, so does dedicated training, and Aurel has been diligently working out for years now. Lena admits that she was wrong and agrees to help Aurel with his training, but she warns him that if he wants her to hit him, then she won't be holding back, and she doesn't want to hear any complaining afterwards. A few minutes later, Lily comes running home with some terrible news. She just checked her tournament bracket, and of all the teams that they could have fought, the organizers set them up against the Black Blade Guild, and those guys have 8 A rankers on their team. Even so, Lilia still remains confident that she and the others will be able to come out on top, but now that she's done with her speech, she realizes that Lena has been beating Errol up for a while now. Lena defends herself and says he was the one who asked her to do this, and despite his severe injuries, Aurel doesn't seem all that bothered, so he gets up and asks what's for lunch. The day of the guild competition finally comes around, and once the group arrives for their match, they overhear a pair nearby talking about how unlucky Dragon Fang was to be matched with Black Blade. They remember that Dragon Fang used to be one of the top guilds, but they aren't willing to risk their money on some underdogs, so they are betting it all on Black Blade. Lilia is offended that those guys think Dragon Fang is going to lose, so she starts heading over there to give them a piece of her mind, but Lena holds her back because it's not worth getting in trouble over. Aurel couldn't care less about whether the people believe he will win or not, but he's surprised to find out that gambling is allowed here. Lena explains that all matches at the Colosseum can be bet on, and as things stand, the odds on their match are 20-1. Lilia is mad because that means no one expects them to win, but she says this could be a great opportunity to make even more money. If they don't win, their guild will be screwed either way, so she decided to take out another loan using their building as collateral so she could bet on their match. And Errol now understands how the guild got into so much debt in the first place. Just then, Lilia hears a man laughing at her from behind, so she turns around to see who it is, and to her annoyance, she finds Jorg, a guild master of Black Blade, standing there. She asks him what he wants, so Jorg tells her he's just here to wish them luck since he hates seeing how his former rival guild has fallen on rough times. He even heard that they were desperate enough to accept a classless loser as a member. Lilia tells him that's none of his business, but Jorg says he went through a lot of trouble to make sure their guilds would be facing each other in the tournament, so of course he'd want to know who Dragon Fang has on its roster. Lilia can't believe Jorg rigged the matches just so he could fight Dragon Fang, but he says he's actually doing them a favor since going up against a popular guild like Black Blade has garnered a lot of attention for them. So they stand a chance of earning a lot of money if they win. But that's only if they manage to pull off a miraculous victory against Black Blade's A-rankers. A little while later, it's time for today's main event, so Errol and the others walk out into the arena. They take a look at the list of combatants for Black Blade, and Errol is surprised that the guildmaster didn't join in since he seemed personally invested in crushing them in this match. He wonders if Jorg might be taking it easy on them, but Lilia and Lena point out that Black Blade's lineup is full of their strongest A-rankers, so it's going to be an insanely tough battle. Upon hearing that, Errol gets excited since it means he will get a chance to see a lot of new skills. But Lilia reminds him that the fate of Dragon Fang is hanging in the balance here, so he had better take this seriously. Once the match officially begins, the announcer introduces Black Blade's first combatant, the fencer Gio. But when she begins introducing Dragon Fang's fighter, she pauses for a second because according to the roster, she's supposed to introduce someone named Errol who is classless, but that can't be right. The crowd begins to murmur amongst themselves because they can't believe a classless loser actually decided to join the tournament, and Gio feels personally insulted by the fact that he has to fight a weakling like Errol. As soon as the match begins, Gio uses Blink Dash to close the distance and stab Errol through the chest, but to his surprise, that turned out to be an afterimage from Errol's shadow skill. He isn't sure how Errol is able to use such a skill when he is classless, but he adapts quickly and begins thinking of a strategy to deal with the afterimages. However, he made a fatal miscalculation because he had thought Errol was limited to only 3 afterimages, and after he had taken out 3 of the clones, he let his guard down, allowing the real Errol to swoop in and deal a finishing blow. Gio falls to the ground unconscious, and the crowd goes wild at the unexpected turn of events. Both Lilia and Lena had faith that Errol would win, but Lena never could have expected that he wins so easily, and everyone in the crowd is just as surprised. But Errol, on the other hand, is far more concerned by the fact that he wasn't able to figure out how Gio's thrust skill works while he was fighting him, so he's going to have to work on it later. Errol's next match is against a dual swordsman, and as the boy charges at him, Errol easily blocks the initial strike and counters with a twin-blade slash that knocks him off his feet in one fell swoop, earning him yet another victory. The third competitor he has to go up against is a barbarian, and since Errol has only fought swordsmen up to this point, he tries surprising him with a kick, but he was nowhere near fast enough to catch Errol off guard, so he blink dashes behind the barbarian and slashes him across the neck to end the match. Lena can barely believe that Errol really just eliminated the third A-ranked fighter all by himself, but Lilia is really excited because if they are lucky, Errol might be able to win all 5 matches on his own. Lena tells Lilia that it sounds like she doesn't want to have to fight in the tournament at all, and it sounds like that because it's true. She knows damn well that if she were in Errol's position, she would have been defeated in less than a minute. There's no way she could handle a one-on-one fight with an A-ranker, which is why she's focusing all of her energy on cheering for Errol like her life depends on it. In Errol's next match, he's up against a shield bearer and he's having a hard time breaking through this guy's defenses, but he's still outpacing him. The shield bearer is angry because he thinks Errol has been lying about being classless, since there's no way he could have beaten the other 3 so easily without a class. Errol says his victories have been a result of his tremendous effort, but the shield bearer thinks that sounds stupid because everyone knows effort can never overcome the power of classes. However, Errol points out that if what he said was true, then he wouldn't be getting his ass handed to him by a teenager. The shield bearer charges at Errol and tries to use his shield bash skill to knock him over, but he sees it coming and counters with a kick, knocking the shield right out of the shield bearer's hand. The shield bearer is freaked out because he says he recognizes that kick, and Errol tells him that it's probably because he copied it from the barbarian he fought in the last round, although he still hasn't quite gotten the hang of it. So while he's talking, he adjusts his footing and attempts another kick, striking the shield bearer in the side. The shield bearer doesn't understand how this is possible, since there's no way he should be able to casually learn a skill like that. Errol admits that there are some skills that are really complex, and those take a lot of practice to master, but for some of the more basic ones, he can learn them after simply seeing someone use them. To demonstrate, he walks over to the shield on the ground and picks it up before knocking the shield bearer out with his very own shield bash attack. This is now his 4th victory, and it's clear that Errol is incredibly strong, but the crowd is starting to doubt that he is really classless. They all think he is faking it, so they start yelling for Errol to be disqualified. However, Due to all the outrage, the organizers decide to take the liberty of contacting the Guild Association to get a copy of Aurel's original class assessment. The announcer asks Aurel if he is okay with her sharing his personal information with the crowd, and he says he's fine with it if it will get everyone to calm down. She then proceeds to display Aurel's assessment card for all to see, and plain as day, it says Aurel is classless, so everyone agrees that he isn't faking it. Lilia says that if she had known Aurel was this strong, then she would have pawned off a bunch of her dad's treasures to place an even larger bet. Lena is starting to become concerned about Lilia's gambling problem, but she admits that Aurel's strength is greater than anything she could have imagined. The final Black Blade combatant is called up on the stage, and Aurel can immediately tell that this guy is a cut above the rest, so he needs to be cautious. Masamune is impressed that Aurel could sense the danger and chose to keep his distance, because he planned to lure him into striking range and finish him off in an instant with his ultimate move. As soon as Aurel hears the word ultimate move, he decides that it's worth the risk after all, so he starts approaching Masamune's striking range. The second he gets close enough, Masamune unsheathes his sword and performs his lightning speed strike, but just when he thought his sword had connected with Aurel's neck, he vanishes. He doesn't understand what just happened, but Aurel simply appears behind him and explains that while Masamune is incredibly fast, he was trained by someone who's even faster, so his reaction speed is on a different level. He then uses the ultimate skill he learned from his mom, the Piercing Tempest. After being hit, Masamune is knocked unconscious, so Aurel is declared the winner, and both Lena and Lilia look at each other in shock because they can't believe they won without having to do anything. As Aurel walks off stage, Lilia jumps at him for a big hug, but he instinctively steps out of the way since his sister used to give him surprise hugs all the time. He then turns and sees Lena with her arms wide open for a hug, but then she realizes what she's doing, so she turns away in embarrassment and apologizes for getting carried away. Aurel says he actually would have been fine with hugging Lena, but he wishes she had taken her armor off first so he could enjoy the soft comfort. Meanwhile, from the stands, Jord watches as Aurel and the others celebrate their victory, and he vows to make him pay for this humiliating loss. That night, they'd all return to their guild to celebrate Aurel carrying them to victory, and Liliet is still trying to convince him to marry her so she can mooch off his talent for the rest of her life, but he says if he were going to marry anyone, it would be Lena. Lena shoots up from her seat and tells Aurel to stop making fun of her because there's no way he actually means it. Aurel asks why she would think he is lying, so she explains that most guys often mistake her for a guy who only cares about swinging a sword, and Aurel admits that he made the same mistake when he first met her. She is sure that Aurel wouldn't want to marry someone with no womanly charm like her, but Aurel is staring at two very compelling pieces of charm right now. In any case, Lena says she's focusing on becoming the world's greatest swordswoman so she doesn't have time to spend on romance, and Lilia is relieved to hear that since it means she won't be competing for Aurel's attention. She begins rubbing Aurel's leg and offers to give him a special massage as thanks for all the hard work he put in today, but Aurel turns her down and asks Lena to do it for him instead. However, instead of a regular massage, he says he wants her to start bashing him with her sword like last time. Lena asks if he's really sure about this since she's starting to feel bad about hitting him so much, but he says this is the only way he can learn the gut skill, and Lena is the most skilled and trustworthy person he knows, so she's the only one he can ask to do this. Just then, Lilia's dad comes downstairs to see what all the commotion is, and at first he thinks Lena is taking her frustration out on Aurel because they lost this afternoon's tournament, but to his surprise, Lilia tells him they actually won their match against Black Blade and she made enough money to cover their debt and keep the guild operational. Her dad can't believe it and asks if Black Blade made a mistake and sent a bunch of rookies to fight them, but she informs him that they actually sent out their strongest fighters and Aurel still managed to beat them all on his own. Lilia's dad is in shock because he didn't think Aurel would be so strong, but he refuses to show even a hint of optimism and says it's only a matter of time before he ditches them for a better guild. Lilia says that's not going to happen because she's going to marry Aurel, but Aurel interjects and says he never agreed to any marriage proposal. Lilia's dad continues talking about how it is pointless to try and save the guild, but Aurel is getting sick of all the negativity, so he tells Lilia's dad to shut up because at least Lilia is trying to do something with her life, unlike her sorry excuse for a father. He's always so busy bitching about the fact that he only has one arm now. The last time Aurel checked, you only need one hand to hold a sword. That last statement gets Lilia's dad riled up, so he grabs Aurel by the collar and tells him he doesn't know what he's talking about since all the dual swordsman skills he once had are practically useless with only one blade. But as someone who had to learn to fight with absolutely zero skills, Aurel tells him to just get good already. Lilia's dad has no comeback for that, so he lets Aurel go and storms out of the training hall. Lilia apologizes for her father's behavior and she thanks Aurel for standing up to him because she thinks his words might have gotten through to Rod a bit. Lena hopes it will encourage him to start training again since she knows he is an amazing person at heart, and Errol says he would love to see Rod training since there are a lot of skills he would want to learn from a dual swordsman. Since Errol seems really interested in learning new skills, Lilia suggests taking a trip down to the dungeon beneath the city. She says it's a place full of traps and swarming with monsters, so Errol is excited to check it out, and Lena wants to go too since she needs to get some real battle experience under her belt in preparation for the Sword God tournament. Errol asks her what the Sword God tournament is supposed to be, so she explains that it's similar to the tournament they just fought in. But this one determines the strongest swordsman in the entire city, so it's a really big deal. Lilia assumes Errol will want to participate, so she takes out a form and tells him to sign on the dotted line, but Errol takes one look at it and rips the papers up because Lilia was trying to trick him into signing a marriage certificate. Lilia tries to play it off as a harmless prank, but Errol isn't letting that slide, so he puts her in a headlock and refuses to let her go until she apologizes. Meanwhile, a woman in a dark robe has been spying on them through a crystal ball on Jorg's orders because he is holding a grudge. He soon comes over to ask if she has figured out where they are heading, so she informs him that they are apparently going to the dungeon soon, and Jorg thinks this is perfect, since no one would suspect him if an unfortunate accident were to occur while the kids are in there. The next morning, Lilia sneaks into Errol's room in a nightgown in an attempt to seduce him, but Errol has dealt with this from his sister enough times to sense when someone is invading his personal space, so he wakes up and grabs Lilia by the head as hard as he can. Lilia starts begging for mercy, so Errol lets her go, but he's not taking any chances, so he grabs the bedsheets and ties her to his bed frame. He then heads over to Lena's room to ask her for help talking some sense into Lilia. He knocks on the door and he hears Lena tell him to come in, but when he enters, he finds her fast asleep in bed. It turns out that she's a heavy sleep talker and she's imagining Errol's voice as her father's, and she looks really cute right now, so he plays along and pats her on the head. Later that day, the group heads over to the dungeon, and Errol is surprised that this is what it looks like since he was expecting more of a cave-like entrance. He's also shocked that there are so many people here, but Lena explains that it's because the Sword God tournament is approaching and everyone wants to practice as much as possible before the big day. Once they arrive inside, Lilia shows Errol the teleportation circle and explains that it allows people to instantly teleport to any floor they have been to before. However, since Errol has never been in the dungeon, he's going to have to work his way down from floor 1, but Lilia tells him he doesn't need to worry because she will show him the quickest way to get down to the lower floors. And while she's doing that, Lena can go do whatever she wants somewhere else. Lena says she wants to come as well, but Lilia says there's no need for Errol to have 2 guides, so it would be an inefficient use of her time. She then starts leading Errol over to the entrance, but then she mentions how excited she is to have fun with Errol once they are alone, so he immediately stops and tells Lena that he wants her to come too. Later on, the group faces their first real challenge, living armor. Errol charges in first and clashes swords with one of the armor sets, and he's impressed by how fast it is for armor, but he's still way faster, so he is easily able to cut its head off. However, to Errol's surprise, the armor continues moving even though it has been decapitated. Lena explains that the armor is empty and uses the magic of the dungeon to move, so it doesn't have any actual weak spots. In that case, Errol figures that the best way to stop it would be to take out the armor's legs, so he runs off and slashes it in the kneecaps like it owes him money. Lena finishes taking care of her armor soon after, so the room is clear for now, but the armor will start regenerating sooner or later. Lilia then comes over, talking about how tough the fight was, but Errol points out that she literally didn't do anything to help. Lilia defends herself and says it's not her fault since Errol and Lena just took out all the armor sets before she got a chance to do anything, but come to think of it, Errol has literally never seen Lilia fight, so he doesn't even know what her class is. Lilia takes her sword out and tells him she's a fencer, so if he wants to learn any of her skills, she would be happy to teach him, but a fencer is technically just a downgraded version of his mother's sword princess class, so Errol says there's nothing Lilia can teach him. The group starts heading to the room's exit, but all of a sudden they run into a boy who looks severely injured. He tells them that he fell into a trap after entering a new room, and his teammates are still stuck there, so he needs help rescuing them. Lena immediately agrees to help him, but Lilia tells her to hold on for a moment. However, not because she thinks the guy is suspicious, it's because she wants to get paid first. She has a motto of never doing things for free, so she tells the guy to cough up some dough if he wants them to save his friends, and he reluctantly gives in to her demands, so Lilia is now completely on board with helping him. However, while the others are okay with it, Errol thinks this whole thing is sketchy because he seems awfully mobile for someone with so much blood on him. Lilia brushes it off and says not everyone is as strong as Errol, so the guy probably just took a few unlucky hits while he was escaping. Errol still has his suspicions, since if he had lost as much blood as this guy, he wouldn't be able to stand, much less walk, so he is certain the guy's injuries are fake. He's not sure what kind of trap the guy is planning, but he thinks it'll be a good challenge, so he decides to just go along with it. The guy leads them to the entrance of a secret room, and they find a pool of blood in the middle, but no sign of the boy's missing friends. Lena wonders if they are too late, but Lilia is much more concerned about the random coin she spots on the ground, so she rushes to pick it up, inadvertently activating a teleportation circle. The guy begins laughing because his job here is done since he has successfully led the group into the trap, but he failed to realize he was also standing inside the circle, so he gets caught in the trap as well. A moment later, the group finds themselves on a different floor, and neither Lena nor Lilia recognizes this place, so this must be one of the deeper floors. They then hear the guy who tricked them saying it's not fair that he got caught in the trap too, and Lilia is about to give him a beatdown as payback, but she accidentally kicks her coin out into the middle of the room, causing a metal knight to appear. The guy looks terrified and explains that he was paid to trick them into a teleportation trap that would send them to the bottom of a dungeon where they'd have to face a sword god. And that knight over there is the sword god in question. Lilia and Lena think the guy is bluffing since sword god classes are only a myth, but a moment later, the knight unsheathes its sword and launches a slash that nearly takes the guy's head clean off. The knight then targets Errol and knocks him into a wall with a lot of force, but thanks to all his endurance training with Lena, Errol is able to withstand it with minimal damage. He then strikes back at the knight, but it uses an advanced version of Dash Divine Step to back away. Errol is certain that this is a real sword god, but rather than being worried, he sees this as a good opportunity to go all out and test all his skills. He then uses Divine Step to close the distance and clash swords with the knight, but the knight activates a Divine Presence ability in retaliation. This ability normally restricts the movements of everyone in the area, but Errol is unaffected because he spent a lot of time training with his mom to learn how to counter it. At the time, he could barely stay on his feet, but now he is able to jump out of the way of the knight's attack and dice it to pieces with his infinite break slash. Now that the battle is over, Errol drinks some holy water to recover, and while he is resting, Lena and Lilia ask him how he knew about the sword god skills when even they had never seen it before. He explains that he learned it from his mom, and while she usually limits herself to the moveset of a sword princess, she's actually a sword god. That sounds hard to believe, but Lena knows Errol wouldn't lie about something like that, so she believes him. However, she doesn't understand why his mom would pretend to be a sword princess in the first place. He says his mom just didn't want all the attention that would come with it, so she kept that part a secret. Back on the surface, Rod has just found out about the trap Jorg set, and he is heartbroken by the thought that his daughter might be dead. But to the surprise of both Rod and Jorg, Errol and the others all walk into the bar laughing like nothing happened. Rod is relieved that Lilia is alright, and Jorg can't believe they managed to survive against a sword god. Lilia smirks, telling Jorg that Errol easily defeated it. But that's not all, since they already got the kid to confess that Jorg was the one behind the whole trap. Jorg begins panicking a little over the fact that he was caught, but then he remembers that there are no laws in the dungeon, so he can be arrested for any crimes committed in there. He confidently walks out, telling them there's nothing they can do about it, but as soon as he gets home, he starts trashing his room because he can't believe a kid like Errol is so much better than him. All of a sudden, a sword in his room starts talking to him, and it promises to help him achieve his goal if he sets it free. The next day, Lilia and Lena are sitting in the lounge, and Lilia looks really worried because the preliminary pairings for the tournament have been posted, and she just found out she's going to have to go up against Errol, so there's no way she's making it to the finals now. Errol tells her not to feel too bad about it, since her chances of winning the tournament at her skill level were already pretty slim. But that doesn't make her feel any better. Fortunately for Lena, she's not in Errol's section of the preliminaries, but she's still going to have to face a lot of tough opponents, so she needs to do her best if she wants to make it past the preliminaries this year. Lilia also intends to give it her best shot, even though she knows there's no way she's beating Errol, so she says she is heading down into the dungeon again to train today. She asks Errol to come along since she wants him there for protection in case something bad happens, but he doesn't really feel like dungeon diving again. Just then, Rod comes out to see what's going on, and after learning that Lilia plans to head into the dungeon again, he warns her to be extra careful because there's no telling when Jorg might set another trap, and he doesn't want to lose her. Lilia can see that her dad is really concerned about her, so she assures him that she will keep her guard up at all times, and hearing that is a huge relief for him. Errol is surprised by Rod's sudden behavioral change, but after nearly losing his daughter to Jorg's cruelty, he realized that he can't let himself remain a weakling just because he lost an arm, so he has decided to begin training again. Sometime later, the day of the Sword God Cup preliminaries finally arrives, and a huge crowd has gathered to see all the swordsmen and women face each other. Lilia ended up losing her first match against a random guy despite all her training, and she is really upset about it. Errol tries to comfort her by saying her failure was inevitable, so there's no need to beat herself up about it, but again, that doesn't make her feel better in the slightest. Aurel has won all his fights up till now, so the next match for this bracket will be the finals, and while Lilia is aware of how strong he is, she warns him to keep his guard up because the woman he will be facing has a lot of unique skills. Errol wonders what Lilia means by unique skills since he thought he had seen pretty much all the skills from the dungeon. However, Lilia explains that so far, Aurel has only encountered swordsmanship skills, but that woman has the magic swordsman class, meaning she can enchant her blade with magic as she fights. Aurel is surprised that there are no rules against using magic since this is meant to be a swordmanship tournament, but then again, it doesn't really bother him. He walks out onto the stage, and the first thing the girl says is that being a magic swordsman is allowed by the tournament, so she doesn't want to hear any excuses about magic being against the rules after she wins, and Aurel says he's always ready to face a good challenge. The match begins, and the girl begins spamming fireballs, forcing Aurel to jump around the ring to evade them all. He tries charging at her so he can strike the girl up close, but she parries the attack and proceeds to launch another fireball at point-blank range to force Aurel to back off. By this point, Aurel has gotten a solid feel for what the girl is capable of, and he admits that it must be pretty convenient to be able to attack at both long and short ranges like that. But at the end of the day, he says her skill level is only mid-tier because she hasn't truly mastered either magic or her swordsmanship. She's just spamming attacks. The girl gets offended and tells Aurel he won't be saying that once she uses her ultimate technique on him. The girl then uses magic to engulf her sword in fire, and this gets Aurel's attention since it's a rare sight. She begins launching waves of fire at Aurel, and he is truly impressed because the erratic movements of the flames make it difficult to tell where the attacks are coming from. He tells her it is bound to be a spectacular skill when she masters it, but as of now, it's still so basic that he barely needs to move to deflect the flames. If the girl's swordsmanship were at least as good as Lilia's, then he might have actually had trouble dealing with the flame sword skill, but she just came here hoping to beat the competition with sheer firepower, so it won't take much to beat her. The girl grows enraged and says there's no way she could be defeated by a classless loser, but in the next moment, Aurel uses Twin Blade Slash to put out her sword's fire, and he then dashes forward to knock her out. With this, Aurel has been declared the winner of this section of the preliminaries, but the only thing on his mind right now is whether there's some special training he can do to learn how to use magic as well. A few days later, Lilia wakes her dad up from a nap and tells him it's time for Aurel's match in the Sword God Cup, but Rod says he's not going. Lilia starts pulling his arm and begging him to get up because their guild already has registered seats, but he absolutely refuses to attend the tournament. Lilia asks him if it's because he's worried he might run into Jorg there, but he says that's not it. He explains that a few days ago he started training again and it made him realize how rusty he'd have gotten. It might even be a challenge for him to win the Sword God tournament in his current state, but hearing her dad talk about winning the tournament like it's the bare minimum really pissed Lilia off because she couldn't even qualify for it. She tells him he's coming to the arena today whether he likes it or not, and she drags him off the couch so he can get dressed. Once Rod is ready, he and Lilia start heading towards the arena, and as much as he was fussing about not wanting to go to the tournament, Lilia knows he would have gone to watch in secret anyway since he never misses an opportunity to see his guild members perform well, and Rod can't deny that. Meanwhile, over in the arena, Lena is fidgeting in her seat because she's really nervous about her match. Aurel eventually pops up and asks her if something is wrong since he has never seen her so anxious before, but Lilia says she can't help it because this is the biggest tournament in the city, and to make matters worse, she won't find out who her opponent is until the start of her match, so there's no telling what kind of fighter she'll be up against. Just then, the announcer informs everyone that the first match of the day will be between last year's winner, George the Sword Emperor, and Aurel. Aurel is surprised that he's going to be fighting Jorg first, but he's always ready for a good fight, so he heads out to confront Jorg. However, as Jorg steps out into the arena, everyone is shocked to discover that he somehow found a way to make himself even uglier than he was before. And Aurel can sense some sinister energy coming off of him. Rod and Lilia are in the stands, and Lilia wonders why Jorg looks like a monster now, but her dad can tell that something is seriously wrong here. Just then, he notices the sword in Jorg's hand, so he yells for Aurel to stay away from him at all costs because that blade has a powerful demon sealed within it. The demon is surprised because it didn't think anyone would be able to recognize the sword so quickly, and it's clear that it has already taken full control of Jorg's body. The legend says the blade that the sword god used to kill the demon was cursed with a grudge, so the soul of that demon now resides within it, but that sword was supposed to be sealed within the royal vault, so Rod doesn't understand how Jorg could have gotten his hands on it. The demon says it was only a matter of time before some ignorant idiot came looking for power and set it free, and that idiot was Jorg, so now the demon, Durgelda, plans to wreak havoc on the world. Though I have no idea why he chose to patiently wait for the tournament to start before making his appearance if he just wants to destroy the world. Lena can't believe Durgilda is really here, since she learned in history class that this demon was summoned by an evil deity in ancient times to burn the world down. But everyone just thought it was a myth. Everyone begins to panic once they realize this isn't a joke, so they all start running out of the arena, and Durgilda is loving all the shrieks of pure terror. However, before anyone could make it out of the stadium, Durg cast a barrier, trapping them all inside. No matter how hard they try, none of them can escape, and Durg plans to take his time slaughtering them all. But then he notices Aurel squared up for a fight. He finds it amusing that a brat like him is dumb enough to raise his blade instead of begging for mercy, but Aurel says he is confident that he can win this fight. After all, a long time ago, Durg was defeated by a sword god, so he isn't invincible. Durg admits that it's true that he was defeated by a sword god in the past, but based on Jorg's memories, there is no living sword god right now, so there's no one to stop him. Aurel tells Durg that he was wrong about two things just now. First of all, there is still at least one sword god alive in this time period, and two, even though Aurel isn't technically a sword god, he is still confident that he can beat Durg. Durg begins laughing because he thinks Aurel must be delusional, but it stops being funny real quick once Aurel uses Divine Step to close the distance and nearly takes Durg's head off. Durg can't believe his eyes because only a sword god should have that ability, so he demands to know how Aurel acquired it, but he isn't interested in talking right now. He begins relentlessly attacking Durg, but Durg suddenly gets a smirk on his face once he realizes that he is in the body of a sword emperor, so his sword strikes are incredibly powerful. He jumps into the air and lands a direct hit on Aurel's shoulder, slamming him into the ground, but to Durg's shock, once the dust clears, Aurel is perfectly fine. He doesn't understand how a kid could manage to shrug off such a powerful attack, but Aurel just says his training for the guts skill is finally starting to pay off. Durg is starting to get nervous because nothing he tries against Aurel is working, and at this rate, it will only be a matter of time before he is defeated. Soon after, Aurel uses the infinite break skill to attack Durg hundreds of times in a single second, and it is way too much for him to handle, so he is eventually overwhelmed and Aurel stands victorious. Jorg's body is completely out of protection, and he is confident that Durg shouldn't be able to attack anymore, so he starts walking away. Meanwhile, Durg is internally saying every curse word in the book because he doesn't want to be sealed away again, but he knows there's no way he can beat Aurel. He comes to the conclusion that the best course of action here would be to get as far away from Aurel as possible, but to do that, he needs to find a new host whose body will be strong enough to escape. He briefly considers going for Lena, but Aurel is too close to her, so instead he decides to target Rod. All of a sudden, Aurel notices the demon's sword fly out of Jorg's hand in his direction, so he jumps in front of Lena to push her out of the way, but it then pulls up and hits the stands instead. By the time the smoke clears, Lilia is alright, but Durg is now holding the sword to her neck with Rod's body, and he demands that Aurel let him go or else his wife will be killed. Aurel bluntly replies that he never married Lilia, but Durg thinks he is bluffing because he has access to Rod's memories, and he can clearly remember all the times Lilia told Rod that she was going to make Aurel her husband. Aurel suddenly doesn't feel like saving Lilia anymore, so he gets ready to attack anyway, but Lena tells him to stop because Lilia is still their friend. Aurel tells her there's no real reason to worry since he doesn't think Durg would be able to hurt Lilia in the first place, and Durg takes this as a challenge, so he prepares to slice Lilia's throat to prove how heartless he is, but for some reason his arms won't move. Rod is still conscious inside his body, and there's no way he would just stand by and watch as his daughter is murdered with his own hands, so he begins fighting to evict Durg from his body. Durg desperately offers to grant Rod the power to reclaim his former glory if he relinquishes his body, and had this happened a few days ago, Rod might have fallen for the temptation, but thanks to Aurel, he now knows that anything is possible with enough hard work, so he doesn't need Durg's power. Rod regains control of his body and chucks the sword towards Aurel, who then proceeds to slice it to pieces, destroying Durg for good. But if breaking the sword is enough to get rid of him, then why the hell did anyone think it was a good idea to keep it around in the first place? Later on, back at the guild, Rod has regained his passion for swordsmanship. And with all the publicity Aurel brought to their guild, there are a lot of new applicants for him to train. As he is brutally beating them down, he yells that they need to stop relying on their skills so much and learn to defend themselves. But the students all beg him to have mercy because they can't take much more of this. Meanwhile, one of the students is hiding behind a wall nearby when Lilia happens to spot him. She asks why he's slacking off here when he and the others are supposed to be training, but he tells her Rod is way too intense, so he needed a break. Lilia admits that her dad has become a lot more passionate about his swordsmanship since he met Aurel, and speaking of Aurel, the boy asks where he is since he hasn't shown up all day. Lilia informs him that Aurel actually quit the guild recently and Lena's gone too since she went chasing after Aurel. Lilia has been holding herself together so far, but she suddenly breaks out in tears because she doesn't think it's fair that Aurel left her behind. As for Errol, right now he's on his way back to his hometown, and the driver is surprised to learn that Errol was able to win the Sword God Cup during his short stay in the city. He asks if he's sure he wants to leave so suddenly at the height of his fame, but Errol says there's nothing more for him to learn there, so there would be no point in hanging around any longer. Besides, he has been meaning to return home so he can finally test his skills, because with everything he has learned, he might actually be able to defeat his mother. Back in Errol's hometown, his mother is busy picking some flowers in the garden, so he tries sneaking up on her, but she suddenly calls him out without even looking in his direction. She says she's glad to see him again, and she can tell that he has grown a lot stronger since she couldn't sense his presence until he was within a few meters. Errol bluntly informs her that he won the Sword God Cup, and his mom is excited to hear that because she did the same when she was a kid. However, just as Errol is about to ask her for a duel to test his strength, she decides to establish her superiority and dashes in front of Errol so fast that he couldn't react at all. His mom is just messing around, but if she had been holding a sword instead of a flower, he could have been in real trouble, and that's exactly why he wants to train with her again. She says she wouldn't mind sparring with him, but if they did so now, they would definitely end up destroying the house, so she invites Errol to come to the training grounds behind the mountain, and he happily agrees. Once they arrive, Farah tells him she's excited to see how strong her son has grown, and then immediately lunges at him with another divine step attack. However, after seeing her do it once, Errol has figured out how to react to it. So he raises his sword in time and blocks her strike. He then leaps into the air and performs a combination of divine slash and twin blade slash, but Farah is able to block all the attacks before they hit her. She's impressed that Errol was able to come up with a way to combine two skills, and Errol asks her what skill she used to block his attack since he had never seen it before, but she tells him she wasn't using a skill. Watching her, Errol learned not to rely too much on special skills all the time, as she was just swinging her sword normally to counter. Meanwhile, back in town, the people suddenly hear a lot of loud noises coming from the forest, and they are all frightened because they are worried it might be a powerful monster, but it's just Errol and Farah going all out. Farah attempts to use Divine Presence to slow Errol down, but he has already mastered that skill, so it has no effect on him anymore. Farah is impressed by how far Errol has come, so she says she is going to pull out the big guns now, and Errol says he's going to do the same, so they both rush forward and hit each other with infinite break. Meanwhile, Lena has just returned home as well, but there's no one around, and she wonders if it might have something to do with those loud noises she heard earlier. But that doesn't matter to her because she just wants to see Errol again. She knocks on his front door to see if he is home, but to her surprise, a little girl opens the door. She assumes this must be Errol's little sister, so she asks her if Errol is around, but the girl takes one look at Lena's abundant chest and she gets jealous, so she calls Lena a cow and tries to slam the door. Lena doesn't understand why the girl keeps calling her a cow, but she holds the door open and tries explaining that she just wants to talk to Errol. However, the girl refuses to listen and tells her Errol would never want anything to do with a cow like her. Just then, Errol and Farah return, and Farah tells Errol's sister to stop being rude to their guest. The girl is excited to see Errol again and runs into his arms, but she wonders why he and Farah look so beat up. Farah explains that she and Errol had a match and went a little overboard. Errol's sister asks who won, so Farah tells her Errol came out on top, and Lena is amazed to hear that since Farah is a sword god. However, Errol says the only reason he ended up winning was because Farah isn't in top form anymore since she stopped training seriously years ago, so he doesn't want to let this victory get to his head. Farah tells Errol not to say it like that since it makes her sound like an old lady, but he tells her she's still way too pretty to be an old lady. They'd all head inside and sit down at the table to talk, and Farah would like to ask about all the adventures Errol had in the Sword City, but she's much more interested in hearing about how Errol and Lena met since she loves romance stories. Errol explains that he and Lena lived together while he was in the Sword City, and Farah's face lights up with excitement after hearing that, but Lena clarifies that they were just members of the same guild, so there was no inappropriate behavior between them. Errol asks Lena why she came to visit him all of a sudden, and she says she wanted to ask him why he suddenly abandoned the guild like that. Errol is confused because he's sure he submitted an official resignation letter behind before leaving, so it's not like he left without giving the guild notice, but that's not what Lena is talking about. She tells him he could have at least said goodbye in person before leaving, but Errol didn't put much thought into it. Farah interrupts and says she's glad Errol has a friend who cares about him enough to come all this way just to visit, but Lena tells her this is actually her hometown too, so she would have come back anyway. And checking on Errol wasn't the only reason she wanted to come here, so she turns to Farah and asks if she would be willing to accept her as a disciple. Farah wasn't expecting to hear a request like that, but before she could give Lena an answer, someone suddenly walks in the front door, and she recognizes the voice as that of Evans. Evans enters the room looking for Farah, and he tells her he needs her help with an emergency because there was a terrifying sound coming from behind the mountain a little while ago, and they need to prepare in case it's a monster. Farah and Arel immediately realize that they are the reason for the panic, but Farah knows she would get scolded if she told him the truth, so she lies and tells him she has already defeated the monster. Evans doesn't really question it since he is just relieved that the village is safe, and now that he has calmed down, he notices that Lena is here and asks her when she got back. Farah didn't recognize Lena at first since she looks a lot different from how she was as a kid, but now that she looks closely, Lena does look a lot like Evans' late wife. Evans asks why Lena is at Farah's house, so Farah explains that Lena just asked to learn everything there is to know about being a good wife for Errol. Evans breaks down in tears of joy because he thinks his daughter is going to get married soon, but she freaks out and tells him she just wanted to ask Farah to teach her how to get better at swordsmanship. Farah insists that there will be time for both swordsmanship and wife lessons, but when Lena turns to Evans to ask him to talk some sense into Farah, to her surprise, he seems like he's all for it. After his wife died, he was worried about Lena's future because the only thing he knew how to teach her was swordsmanship, so he would be overjoyed for Farah to teach her some housekeeping skills, and Farah assures him that he can trust her to take care of Lena. Evans is grateful to hear that, so he says he is going to return to his duties now, and he will be leaving Lena in Farah's care, so he tells her to do her best. And Lena is left wondering how things turned out like this. This entire time, Errol's dad has been busy in his study working on his magic research, but he's not surprised when Errol walks in because he overheard the entire commotion earlier. Errol asks how Liam's research has been going, and he is happy to announce that he is really close to a breakthrough. It might even become an ultimate technique if his hypothesis is correct. That aside, he asks Errol if it's true that he brought back a cute girlfriend, and Errol doesn't deny it, but he says he would describe her as more beautiful than cute. More importantly, he says there's something he wanted to talk about. He just defeated Farah in a sword fight, so he would like Leon to teach him magic now. However, Leon says it would be impossible for Errol to learn magic, so he should just give up on it. While that's going on, Farah is in the kitchen with Lena, trying to teach her how to cook, and Lena agrees to give it her best shot, but she has literally no experience with anything other than a sword, so she ends up smashing the table to bits. Lena apologizes for the trouble she caused, but Farah says it's fine since it just means she will have to start from the basics. A little while later, Errol and Leon finish fixing up the table, but while Errol is putting away the tools, he asks why Leon didn't just use magic to fix the table. Leon says Farah likes it when he does things by hand, but since Errol wants to see him use some magic, he picks up Mira's broken mug and casts a rebuild spell on it to put it back together. While he and Errol are putting the materials away, he tells Errol that he really shouldn't get his hopes up when it comes to magic. He has proven that even someone born with no class could learn to use a sword, but using magic requires you to have a large mana pool, and that's not something training can improve. Errol admits that it would be impossible for him to use magic without having a large mana pool, but he asks if it would work as long as he had mana. Leon says he could probably learn spells even without a mage class as long as he has mana, but he doesn't think it's likely that Errol has magic in his body since if he did, he would have accidentally cast at least some form of magic by now. However, Errol says he is sure he has magic in his body because back in the Sword City, while he was training with Lena, he was burning through a lot of the guild's holy water, so Lilia went into storage and found a bunch of mystery potions for Errol to use instead. Lena told Errol not to drink it since those might be poisonous, but he thought drinking poison might give him a poison-resistant skill, so he did it anyway. In the end, he said it turned out not to be poisonous, and he definitely felt it restored something in his body other than divine protection, so he believes it was mana. If what Errol says is true, then his dad believes he might really be able to learn magic, so he agrees to teach him. He asks Errol if he can still feel the sensation of mana inside his body, and after he confirms it, Leon asks him to try moving it around and condensing it into one point. Errol gives it his best shot, and at first, nothing happens, but eventually, a faint blue light begins to glow in his hand. His father is ecstatic when he sees this because while the light may be small, it is proof that Errol indeed possesses mana, even if it's only a small amount. Errol begins feeling lightheaded because that little light apparently used up all the mana he had in his body, and his dad tells him he is going to have to work to increase the size of his mana pool before he can cast any spells, but working hard is what Errol does best, so he should be able to do it in no time. The next day, Errol heads to the item shop and dumps a pile of gold coins on the counter because he wants to buy all the mana potions they have in stock, and from then on he kept emptying and refilling his mana pool to increase its size. 6 months later, Errol's mana pool has grown enough to allow him to maintain a ball of mana, and his dad congratulates him on a job well done. But there's still a lot of work to do because Errol's current mana is only equivalent to that of a 10-year-old. He hands Arel a piece of paper with magic text written on it, and he explains that normally with a mage class, the magic script for a particular spell would just pop into your head, but since Arel doesn't have any skills, he's going to need to memorize the magic script for every spell he wants to cast. It's going to be difficult, so Leon suggests that Arel could get some help learning the basics in the City of Magic, but he would need to train his mana to get to the baseline needed for entry first. 3 years go by, and Lena has become quite skilled at household skills thanks to Farah's guidance, so she's very grateful. Just then, Lena and Farah hear Mira crying, and a moment later, she walks into the kitchen with a note. She tells them that she went to Arel's room earlier to wake him up, but when she got there, he was gone, and the only thing left was a note. Everyone takes a look at the note, and word for word, it says, "I'm going to the City of Magic, love Arel." They can't believe Arel would leave without at least saying goodbye to them properly, and Mira is especially hurt. Arel did mention that he was interested in the City of Magic, so he was bound to leave eventually, but it still made Mira really upset, so Farah comforts her with a hug. Lena is also sad about Arel leaving so abruptly, but she realizes she has no right to complain since she kind of did the same to her dad when she left for the City of Swords, but she had no idea how bad it felt to be ditched like this. Farah hugs Lena as well and tells her she had better not disappear on them as well, but Lena never had any intentions of leaving when there's still so much for her to learn from Farah. Farah is glad to hear that Lena will be staying even though Arel is gone, but while she's not particularly worried about his safety, she wishes he and his older sister Astia would show a little more concern for the feelings of others. Meanwhile, Arel is already on a carriage heading to the City of Magic, but the driver tells him it's still going to take another 2 days to get there, so he will just have to wait. On another note, the driver tells Arel that he's really intrigued because 3 years ago he became a sensation in the City of Swords, then disappeared and went home immediately, and now he wants to go to the City of Magic too. Arel sits back down in his seat, and the kid sitting next to him asks if he is really heading to the City of Magic since he looks a little old to be applying to the Magic Institute. Just then, the girl sitting across from him yells at Kato to stop being rude because Arel clearly sucks at magic and probably failed the Magic Institute's entrance exams multiple times, which is why he is going back to apply again today. Arel is about to explain that he has never actually taken the Magic Institute's entrance exam, but Kato suddenly yells back at Kufa that she's the one being rude here, and the two begin arguing. The girl sitting next to them, Khalid, tries to get them to calm down, and Arel assumes they must all be wizards heading for the Magic Institute, but considering their age, they probably only received their magic blessings a few days ago. After Kato is done arguing with Kufa, he turns to Arel and introduces himself as a red mage. He then asks Arel what kind of magic he is good at, and he thinks about it for a bit. While he was learning from his dad, Leon explained that there are 6 types of magic: red, blue, green, yellow, white, and black, each with their own spells associated with them. Normally, a mage is limited to the spells of their color, but Arel has no such limitations, so Leon taught him the basics of all 6 types of magic. As such, he tells Kato that he isn't particularly good at any kind of magic since he is classless. Kato and the others think Arel must be messing with them, since no classless person would want to go to the City of Magic, but Arel assures them that he is telling the truth and even pulls out his ID to prove it. The kids are all shocked once they realize that Arel really is classless, and they all start asking why he's bothering to go to the Magic City when everyone knows classless losers can't use magic. Arel has already had this conversation a bunch of times, so he's not really interested in explaining the circumstances to them. But before the kids could say anything more, they heard a terrifying roar coming from the forest. Arel recognizes it as the roar of a troll king, and the kids are all terrified because they heard that troll kings are super strong. Kato asks the driver to get them out of here quickly, but unfortunately, the roar scared the horses so much that they fainted on the spot, so they won't be going anywhere. Khalid starts freaking out because she's scared of dying, but Kato and Kufa try to calm her down by saying they have a plan. It's true that a troll king is powerful, but at the end of the day, it is still a troll, so it should be big and slow. That means their magic attacks are almost guaranteed to hit, so as long as they work together, they should be able to take it down. Just then, a troll walks out of the forest and Kali immediately loses her nerve, but Kato tells her they need to stay strong if they want to beat the Troll King. However, that wasn't actually the Troll King, and a moment later, the Troll King swats the troll away before revealing its massive frame. All confidence the kids had of beating that thing instantly evaporates because they know none of their magic is strong enough to take something like that down. However, even though his legs are shaking like jelly, Kato stands on business and takes his wand out because he refuses to die without a fight. He pours all of his magic energy into one attack and launches a fireball at the Troll King. To Kato's credit, he at least did something, but even though his blast was a head-on hit, it barely scorched the troll's skin, so it just made the troll angrier. To make matters worse, Kato is completely out of magic, so he can't even spam the attack for cumulative damage. However, just as the troll is about to eat the kids, Aurel cast explosion magic on it, reducing it to ash in an instant. Just like what Bakugo would do to Reze, Aurel realizes he probably should have used a little less power for that attack since he went a bit overkill, but no one got hurt, so everything worked out in the end. The kids can't believe Aurel just used explosion magic because it is a skill that's exclusive to the Archmage class, but he doesn't offer them any explanation and instead heads over to the horses and heals them so they can get back on the road. The driver thanks Aurel for his help and says he hopes they don't run into any more trouble like that, but all of a sudden, Kaido kneels before Aurel and begins sincerely apologizing for making fun of him earlier, because he had no idea that Aurel was an Archmage. Aurel corrects him and says he's not a master of magic, but that doesn't stop Kaido from asking to become his student. Aurel tells him he really isn't a master and pulls out his ID again to show them that he is still classless, but Kua says that the ID must be fake and Aurel must be hiding his identity for some reason. Aurel desperately tries to correct them, but nothing he says is getting through to their little minds, so he decides to just let it go and climbs back into the carriage so they can continue their journey to the Sea of Magic. Once they finally arrive, they say goodbye to the driver, and Kaido is constantly hovering around Aurel like a loyal student. He asks Aurel if he plans to take the entrance exam for the Red Institute, but he's a bit confused because he had no idea that the entrance exams were separate. The kids explain that there is an institute for each type of magic, so Kua will be taking the Blue Magic Institute's entrance exam and Kolit will take the exam for the Green Magic Institute. As for Kaido and Aurel, they'll both be taking the Red Institute's entrance exam, but Aurel is a little worried that he might not be allowed to take the entrance exam here because he's classless, just like what happened in the City of Swords. He and Kaido later arrive at the Red Institute, and after filling out and submitting his application, the receptionist asks him if he's sure everything he wrote down is accurate. Aurel confirms it, so she gives him a number and tells him to wait for his turn on the exam. Aurel is surprised and asks her why she's letting him take the exam even though she's aware that he is classless, but the lady tells him that everyone has the right to take the exam, so she has no reason to reject him just because he is classless. Aurel can still hardly believe that he's being treated so fairly here, but it's a nice change of pace from the usual discrimination. He and Kaido head to the examination hall together, and as they arrive, they spot a kid in the middle of casting a fireball spell at a knight. The instructor approves of the power output, so he tells the kid he passes and calls for the next applicant to step up. A blonde boy walks out of the crowd, and he jokes that it's funny all the other examinees are using beginner-level magic, and that he could do much better. The others are annoyed by his comments, but the boy is already an advanced class mage, so he has the power to back up his bragging. He asks the instructor if it's alright for him to destroy the dummy with his magic, and he is told it won't be a problem, so he readies his wand and casts an intense pillar of fire around the dummy. Everyone is amazed by the boy's level of power, and even Kaido admits that he is talented, but he says Aurel is still better. The boy takes offense to this since he is confident that no one here is as strong as he is, but he isn't childish enough to start a fight over it, so he ignores Kaido's taunts. However, Aurel doesn't appreciate Kaido picking fights for no reason, so he tells him to pipe down. The boy assumes this means Aurel is acknowledging that he is superior. After all, it's not every day you meet a mage strong enough to completely melt a set of armor. However, Aurel points out that the armor is still in one piece, and the boy is left speechless because he doesn't understand how it could have survived his attack. The instructor sees the confusion on his face, so he explains to him that the armor is actually made of mithril, so it won't be easy to destroy. Kaido starts making fun of the boy for bragging so much even though he didn't actually destroy the armor, but Aurel smacks him on the head because he has no right to make fun of someone else's strength when he is weaker. It's Aurel's turn to take the exam next, and this is his first time testing his magic on mithril, so he decides to go all out for once. He prepares his wand, and after gathering the necessary magic, he casts the eruption spell on the armor. Initially, it doesn't look like much happened since the only thing the kids could see was a thin line of fire that hit the armor, so the boy starts joking that Aurel must not be as good as Kaido chalked him up to be. However, a second later, the center of the armor begins to glow red and it melts into a puddle of molten mithril in an instant. The boy can't believe what he just saw because the eruption spell shouldn't be strong enough to melt mithril, and Aurel tells him he's right, but before he cast the spell, he made a few changes to concentrate the power in a single point, and that raised the heat enough to melt the mithril. The boy is stunned when he hears that Aurel tweaked his spell because he didn't even know that was possible, but now that Aurel has passed the test here, he decides to head over to the Blue Institute's entrance exam. There he finds Kua, who has just passed her test by hitting the armor with a water ball, and she is shocked to see him here since she thought he was applying at the Red Magic Institute. The instructor then calls for the next examinee, which happens to be Aurel, so he steps up and casts a few dozen ice spikes, shattering the mithril armor in one go. He then turns and starts walking away because his next stop is the Green Institute. However, as he is walking up to the building, he notices Colette on the floor outside, so he goes over to ask her if something is wrong. She is surprised to see him here, but when he asks why she's crouched outside like this, she tells him that she's so nervous that she can't even bring herself to head inside and register for the exam. She's the kind of person who doesn't perform well when she's under pressure, and usually Kato and Kuo would help calm her nerves, but they aren't allowed to join her in the exam hall. She asks Aurel what he usually does when he gets nervous, but in all honesty, Aurel has never felt nervous before in his life. He asks Colette to explain what being nervous feels like, so she tells him that it's sort of like being afraid of failure, but Aurel doesn't understand either since he has only been able to get this strong because he lets himself fail over and over during his training. The way he sees it, most failures in life won't result in your death, and this entrance exam isn't life-threatening as far as he knows, so there really shouldn't be a reason for Colette to be so scared. Colette is awestruck because she didn't think Aurel would be so insightful, but that was really good advice. She thanks Aurel for his help and tells him she's going to take the test after all, so they both head inside and register. Aurel is called up first, and he is told to cast a wind spell to move the windmill, so he casts Tornado, but he unintentionally destroys it since he didn't realize it was made from regular wood. Everyone is amazed by his performance, and afterwards, the instructor calls on Colette to go up next, but she's getting nervous again because she can't do anything close to what Aurel just pulled off. She starts thinking of backing out, but then she remembers Aurel's words and decides to give it her best shot anyway. In the meantime, Aurel leaves and heads over to the Yellow and White Institutes to take the exams, and once he's done with those, he heads over to the Black Institute, but this place seems really run down. As he is walking through the hall, he spots a cardboard box with a pair of eyes sticking out of it, and a second later, a woman comes over in a panic, asking him if he has seen her goo, so Aurel points to the box on the floor, but he's starting to get freaked out. The woman runs over to the box and she is relieved to find Gooey in there, introducing it as the clay mirror she created recently with a bunch of random animals, and Aurel really doesn't know what to say to that. Just then, a skeleton taps him on the shoulder and welcomes him to the Black Institute, but that triggers Aurel's instincts, so he reflexively chops her head off. The skeleton's head rolls to the ground and her body chases after it while telling Aurel that it's really rude to chop a lady's head off like that. Aurel still has no idea what's going on here, but he can tell she isn't hostile, so he doesn't attack anymore. The skeleton's name is Latalia, and she tells Aurel that she is the one in charge of the Black Institute, but since they rarely get applicants here, there isn't an exam, so Aurel is accepted automatically. This definitely turned out weirder than he thought it would, but on the bright side, he has accomplished his goal of gaining admission to all 6 institutes. This was the end of episode 7. Subscribe to not miss the next part.